Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the beginning of a quite long process of hearing rezoning proposals. We refer to those as hearing 25, but today is geographically relating to Kowhai, Horotiu, Ngaruawahia, and Taupiri. But because this is the first hearing, the council is also going to speak to us about some of the background information that's been provided on the rezoning proposals as a whole. So they won't relate specifically, that information won't relate specifically to the submissions that people on this call have made, but it does set the scene for both this hearing and the others that will follow it. But once they've done that, we will then be hearing from the two Section 42A report authors that have prepared reports that are the subject of this particular hearing. So for those of you that are wanting to get to the nitty-gritty of your own area, as it were, you'll just have to tie-ho for a little bit while that scene setting is done. Couple of things by way of background, or by way of introduction at least, and I'll ask the panel to do some introductions in a minute and everybody else that's on the call. But we have read everybody's submissions, and for those that have provided either evidence, rebuttal evidence, or highlights packages, we've read that as well. We're not anticipating people read vast quantities of material that has been pre-circulated. We're looking for a 10-minute or thereabout highlights package that just explains very succinctly what it is that's being sought and why. If there are any questions that the panel have, we'll ask those at the conclusion of the individual presentations. I'd also say, just by way of introduction, that there'll be a number of people on this call and presenting submissions to us that won't be necessarily familiar with hearings or how things go. All we would say is any questions that we ask will simply to be for us to understand what it is you've said if there's something that we don't quite get. So please try and be as relaxed and relaxed as you can be, given that this may be unfamiliar territory to you. I will ask the panel to introduce themselves briefly, starting with me. I'm Phil Mitchell. I'm chairing these hearings. I'm not in San Francisco, but I've got a picture of the Golden Gate Bridge behind me. So if you are wondering where the voice is coming from, you should be able to find it reasonably easily. So if I could just pass over to the rest of the panel, please, and then the council staff following that. Thanks.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm Janet Gibb. I'm a current Waikato District Councillor and Independent Commissioner on the hearings.
Kia ora, Will Marg, Independent Commissioner.
Hello, I'm Diane Fulton. I'm an Independent Commissioner, but a former councillor on the Waikato District Council.
I'm Jan Sedgwick. I am a Waikato District Councillor and appointed as an Independent Commissioner.
Yes, Paul Cooney, Deputy Chair, a lawyer and Independent Commissioner.
Thanks to the panel for that. If we could just have the council staff that are present, and then I'll just want to say something before I ask everybody else just to briefly introduce themselves as well, please.
Morning all, Fletcher here, District Plan Administrator and Hearings Coordinator for the Waikato District Council. Thanks.
Good morning, it's Betty Connolly here. I'm just a Policy Planner for the Waikato District Council.
Thank you, Ms. Connolly.
Hi there, I'm Jonathan Cleese, did the report on Te Kowhai for the council. Thanks, Mr. Cleese.
And good afternoon, my name is Justine Ashley and I'm the author of the 42A report for Ngaruawahia, Horotiu and Taupiri.
Thanks, Ms. Ashley.
Hi everybody, Jane McCartney, just observing this one. I'm the Section 42A author for Te Kowhai.
Thanks, Ms. McCartney. Is that everyone from the council? I think it is. What we'll just quickly do is just ask, oh sorry, there's another.
It's all right, Mr.
Sorry, I can't quite sit, you're all too small sitting around the table, sorry.
So Bridget Parham, Council for Waikato District Council, and I'll let the others introduce themselves.
Thanks, Ms. Parham.
Good afternoon, I'm Carolyn Red, Assisting Council.
Mark Davey, Section 42 Framework Report Author.
Donna Tracy, Strategic Planning Team Leader.
Will Gauntlet, District Plan Manager here at Council.
Thank you, everyone. If we could just quickly go around the room with everybody else, just so that we know who's there, and if there's any questions or queries that you want to raise after you've introduced yourselves, please do that at the same time. In no particular order, just fire away.
Could I start? I'm John Allen. I see on the Zoom label my wife's name's here, Margarita.
Yes. No, that's fine. Thank you, Mr. Allen.
Hi there, this is Brian and Cheryl from the Year 91 Family Trust Submitters.
Hi.
Thanks. Thank you both. Welcome.
Mark Arbuthnot, I'm a planner here for Port of Auckland.
Thanks, Mr. Arbuthnot.
Submitter from Port Kowhai.
Sorry, someone was speaking, but they sounded a very long way away.
Yeah, sorry about that. Might be my microphone. Greg Metcalf, submitter Reed to Kowhai.
Yep, thanks, Mr. Metcalf. Yeah, you are. You might need to sit a bit closer to your computer or microphone. I think we can hear you, but only just.
All good. I don't think I'm speaking until tomorrow, so
No, that's quite right. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Aaron Collier, planner for Perry's. I'm just observing this afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Collier.
Evan Holbrook, planner for Greg Metcalf, appearing tomorrow.
Thank you, Mr. Holbrook.
Alex Devine, legal counsel for Kainga Ora. I'm just observing today.
Thank you, Ms. Devine.
Laura Galt, Hamilton City Council.
Thank you, Ms. Galt. Still got a couple that few names, but no. I've got one that says D for Mark de la Tour. Whose microphone is off. Now it's on.
Sorry, I've just turned that on. Yes, I'm just observing today. Mark's talking tomorrow.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And I think that might be it. So,
Mr. Steed. Mr.
Oh,
Steed.
Mr. Stead. Yeah, Mr. Stead. Your micro. You might just click on the unmute button, Mr. Stead. We can see you, but we can't hear you.
Yes, Marshall Stead. I'm observing today, Mr. Chairman, and presenting tomorrow.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. You might just want to note for the future that your camera is sort of pointing towards the top of the wall behind you, so we can see the very top of your head, but not much else, for future reference. Thank you very much. The final thing I just wanted to say, is that everybody?
No, there's Mr. Roberts down the bottom of the screen. Would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is Steve Roberts. I'll be submitting this afternoon.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Now I think that's everyone. What I would ask people to do, if they're not speaking, if they could turn their video and sound off, that just preserves the bandwidth of the meeting for those that are actually talking. So you'll still be able to see us and you'll still be able to see and hear the presenters, but it just makes things a bit more straightforward. Mr. Allen, if you wouldn't mind, and also you, Mr. Stead, if you wouldn't mind just turning your video off until it's your turn to speak. Thank you. All right, so with those introductions done and dusted, if we could please ask the Section 42 authors and the other information to make their presentations, please.
Ms. Parham speaking. Mr. Chair. Ms. Tracy is going to begin the presentation on behalf of the council. She's going to explain the relevant strategic documents at both the local and regional level, and she's going to provide some updates on those documents, as a number of them have moved quite significantly since the opening hearing of the plan back in September 2019. She's not going to speak to any specific submission at all. It's more of that strategic overview. Her notes can be provided to the panel later this afternoon.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Tracy. Just when you're ready.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I set out some strategic planning in chronological order over the last 11 years for the Waikato district. So, and I'm happy to take questions as I go. And if you want a little bit more detail or I'm providing too much detail, please let me know.
All right, thank you.
Our first document was the 2009 growth strategy for Waikato District Council. It was developed at the same time as the initial future-proof growth strategy document. It provided clear direction to grow and revitalise the district's towns and villages, and had a target of 80% of growth to occur around existing townships and villages. That same target also features in Future-Proof 2009. The strategy did not set out a land use pattern or identify the growth spatially, but listed the following areas for growth: Hampton Downs and Te Kaupata, Meremere, Huntly, Taupiri, Ngaruawahia, Horotiu, Gordington, Tamahere, Tauwhare, Eureka, Newstead, Te Kowhai, Whara, Busham Downs, Matangi, Ragland, and the Whanga Coast. The strategy was consulted on publicly and submissions at the time were received. In the same year, Council developed the Te Kaupata Structure Plan. Te Kaupata Structure Plan was seen as a key document, as that was our growth town for the district, where we were experiencing growth pressure from the north and the south. The outputs of the structure plan resulted in variation 13 to the part operative plan, and this was notified in 2009. Variation 13 sought to introduce additional residential, reserve, business, and industrial land supply. This would provide for additional housing and employment, and contained a comprehensive network of indicative roads, walkways, ecological areas, as well as setting development contributions so that council had a means to fund these. Some of the proposed residential land supply identified was over the existing undeveloped country living zone. This is located in the west. In conjunction, at the same time, a notice of requirement was lodged for a bypass to remove heavy traffic from the main street. This bypass and designation has since been removed from Council's operative plan. The structure plan and subsequent plan change was ambitious and had the foresight to introduce the first mixed use zoning by a policy overlay, allowing for commercial, medium density residential and open space. To date, this site containing the overlay has yet to be developed. A community group formed and appealed the plan change, contesting the level of growth that Te Kaupata was expected to receive. The appeal saw a reduction in the extent of the residential land of the west, which was retained and kept the country living zone. Once the additional lots were developed, it was to provide for approximately 2,000 new homes. This became operative in 2012. In 2009, at the the same time as the development of the Te Kaupapa Structure Plan and the Waikato District Council Growth Strategy, a sub-regional partnership between Ngā Karawa o Te Waka, Waikato Tainui, Waikato Te Waka Alliance, Waikato Regional Council, Waipa District Council, Waikato District Council, Hamilton City Council, and Waka Kotahi was formed. This was because there was a desire to have a 30-year sub-regional growth strategy to assist the sub-region in community concerns around the lack of collaboration and leadership in the management of growth across the sub-region. There were concerns from Waka Kotahi around the lack of integrated land use and transport planning in the area. Future-proof partners were seeking central government investment for the Waikato Expressway and needed to demonstrate cohesive sub-regional planning that had a sound land use settlement pattern. There was an awareness and a need to inform the up-and-coming Waikato Regional Policy Statement and the Regional Land Transport Plan. An increasing recognition of the Waikato's role in the Upper North Island economy alongside Auckland and the Bay of Plenty region, as well as experiencing significant growth rates across the sub-region. The Future-Proof Growth Strategy was adopted in 2009 following a local government consultative procedure which had a hearing. For Waikato District Council, this was the first time that growth areas and development were identified spatially. These were for our 4 towns, Te Kaupapa, Huntly, Ngaruawahia, Raglan, as well as various rural villages. These areas were mapped as indicative urban limits, which were later included in Chapter 6 of the Waikato Regional Policy Statement. The strategy set out 3 growth scenarios, and the preferred option was a hybrid of compact and a concentrated settlement pattern. This set the directive to flip the current settlement pattern for Waikato District. That was historically approximately 80% of additional homes in the rural and lifestyle areas and only 20% in urban areas. In Future-Proof and the subsequent Waikato Regional Policy Statement, the population of the Waikato District was projected to increase steadily from 45,000 to about 72,000 in 2041 and 86,000 in 2061. In 2020 last year, Waikato District's estimated population was about 81,000 and has the potential to reach between 128,000 and 149,000 by 2060. This is significantly higher than the projections anticipated in the 2009 Future-Proof document and the projections that currently sit in the Waikato Regional Policy Statement. The Waikato Regional Policy Statement and Change 2 aims to provide a statutory basis under the RMA to give effect to the direction set out in Future-Proof. Plan Change 2 saw the introduction of 19 policies in Chapter 6, the Built Environment. This was to better enable sub-region to achieve the outcomes sought by the strategy partners. There was the introduction of policies adopting the Future-Proof land use pattern, density targets, management of rural residential development, Chapter 6A, the development principles, as well as the criteria for alternative land release. Population projection tables and industrial land supply tables were identified in Future-Proof were also embedded into the RPS, along with the indicative urban limit map. There were some appeals relevant to Chapter 6 and largely covered the industrial land allocation and wording changes to the development principles around water, public transport, tangata whenua, and significant industry. The Waikato Regional Policy Statement was made operative in 2016. Following this, Council identified the need to reduce the amount of development occurring in rural areas Most importantly, the land fragmentation and ribbon development around Hamilton City and the loss of rural productivity. This saw council embark on variation 16, which was a plan change for the rural and coastal zone. It was to assist on delivering the target of 80% of development occurring in rural areas and 80% of development occurring in urban areas, and 20% in rural areas. The variation included a new chapter embedding the Waikato District Growth Strategy that was developed in 2009 and an overhaul of the rural and coastal zone rules to tighten up subdivision and development in these areas. Partner councils appealed the variation, and as a result, this saw the minimum parent lot size for development increase further to what was notified. This plan change was made operative in 2014. In 2010, the formation of Auckland Council resulted in a boundary adjustment for the Waikato District. We acquired a portion of the former Franklin District, which now fell in our jurisdiction. This included the townships of Tuakau and Pokeno. 2013, Council received a private plan change in Raglan for the development of the Rangatahi Peninsula. The developer saw a need for additional residential lots to be brought onto the market, as there was a limited supply of new lots available in the township of Raglan. The Rangatahi plan change provided for approximately 500 additional residential lots and a local neighbourhood centre. It was made operative in 2016 with no appeals. After much pressure from the local community, Council decided to embark on a structure plan for the township of Tuakau. It undertook a comprehensive assessment of the existing township and surrounding landscapes. With the Whangarata Business Park plan change already undertaken by Franklin District Council in 2010 to address employment, the focus for the structure plan was to allow for the provision of additional residential land supply and consider how this would connect to the existing township and town centre. The structure plan provided guidance on the development of the town centre, growth cells with staging and timing for residential and rural residential development. It was anticipated to provide for approximately 2,600 additional lots, which would see the town grow to 11,000 people by 2046. Plan change 16 to implement the structure plan had significant rule changes that reflected largely the Waikato section of the operative plan as opposed to the Franklin section. This plan change was later withdrawn in 2017 as it was not delivering on the outcomes identified in the structure plan. In 2015, Waikato District Council sought to update the district growth strategy. This update saw a title change in the document to the Waikato District Development Strategy. The main reason for the update was to incorporate the Franklin District Growth Strategy. The strategy highlighted growth pressures from Auckland and Hamilton and the significant population increases expected, but it did not explicitly provide demographics for the Waikato district due to a lack of updated statistics at the time the document was written. Major moves were identified as building resilient communities, a sustainable environment, governance, transport, free waters, solid waste, and parks and reserves. Key urban and rural outcomes were set with a strong direction to direct growth to existing nodes that have infrastructure available and are in accordance with the identified settlement pattern and future-proof. Maps identified spatially growth areas aligned to Franklin District Growth Strategy, recent structure plans, Tuakau, Te Kowhata, Ngaruawahia and the surrounding villages, and the private plan change for Rangatahi. Consultation on the strategy was limited to just key stakeholders and partner councils. In 2017, Council undertook a structure plan for the Ngaruawahia and the surrounding villages. This included Taupiri, Hopu, Horotiu, Te Kowhai, and Glen Massey. Growth pressure and a shortfall of land supply for residential development was the main driver for the structure plan. It undertook a comprehensive assessment of the existing township and surrounding landscape. The structure plan provided guidance on the development of the town centre, growth cells with staging and timing for residential, business, and rural residential development. It was anticipated to provide for approximately 1,700 additional lots spread across the town and 4 villages. Plan Change 17 was developed to implement stage 1 of the structure plan. This was notified in 2016 before the structure plan was adopted by council. It saw additional residential land in Ngaruawahia, Taupiri and Horotiu, country living zoned land in Te Kowhai and Taupiri, and business zoning in Ngaruawahia and Horotiu. Plan change was made operative in 2017 with no appeals. Also in 2017, council received a private plan change for the township of Te Kowhata. This was called Lakeside. Lakeside Developments Limited lodged their private plan change to rezone 194 hectares of land, predominantly for residential development. This included a neighbourhood centre. The plan change sought medium density and high density development, which would be a first to see those densities in the Waikato district. Lakeside plan change provides for approximately an additional 1,600 lots, and the plan change was made operative in 2018 with no appeals. Again in 2017, we received a private plan change in Pocono. This is by Pocono Land Company, and the developer was currently already working in the township, implementing Franklin District Growth Council's Plan Change 24, the Pocono Structure Plan. Plan Change 21 was to include an additional growth area for residential development adjacent to an existing growth area that was already under development by Pocono Land Company. The plan change was made operative in 2018 with no appeals. In 2017, Future Proof embarked on updating the strategy. This was called the Phase 1 update and incorporated the northern part of the Waikato district that was once the former Franklin district. Demographic projections, supply and demand tables were revised. The indicative urban limit maps were also updated to reflect completed structure plans or plan changes. Urban limit areas for some of the small rural settlements previously included in the 2009 Future Proof document, such as Renown, Waikokowai, Rangariri, Eureka, Fallaway. It gave effect to the National Policy Statement for Urban Development Capacity, 2016. This also resulted in minimum targets for housing being included in the operative and proposed district plans. In 2018, an initiative to develop a Hamilton to Auckland corridor plan emerged from the urban growth agenda by central government. A partnership was formed between Crown, iwi, and councils. The focus of the corridor was due to its significance and uniqueness in terms of the size, volume, and value. This is New Zealand's most significant water, road, and rail corridor. It is a dynamic corridor that connects 2 of New Zealand's largest and fastest growing urban areas with high natural and cultural importance and value. It was identified by the Crown that there was significant further housing and employment growth potential, particularly in the Papakura to Pokeno and Hamilton to Waikato metropolitan areas. Crown acknowledged that there were also challenges. The existing corridor had management issues such as congestion on the southern motorway and water discharge quality affecting the whole upper North Island. This limited future potential unless it was addressed. Crown also acknowledged that the area had the right leadership culture. Councils and mana whenua have a history of working alongside one another and being willing to collaborate across the sub-regions. This was demonstrated by our work as future-proof partners. The initiative built on existing planning processes in the Auckland and Waikato, but recognised that to date, local government did not have all the tools needed to truly transform the corridor. 6 program focus areas were developed: waters, stronger corridor connections, Papakura to Pokeno, river communities, Hamilton to Waikato metropolitan area, and new tools and options. The Hamilton to Auckland corridor helped WDC formalise their relationship with central government. And this facilitated implementation of projects such as the Startup Passenger Rail Service, the North Waikato South Auckland Transport Connections business case with Waka Kotahi, and the corridor plan helped formalise new cross-boundary projects such as water and wastewater planning. The corridor plan has no legal standing and was not consulted on. This includes high-level strategic focus areas, but did not contain a granular land use pattern. The corridor was finalised and the new project partnership was launched in 2018. This was endorsed by Cabinet. An update was subsequently completed in 2020. Following on from the Hamilton to Auckland Corridor project, one of the outputs being the Hamilton Waikato Metropolitan Spatial Area, the Hamilton Waikato Metropolitan Spatial Plan was developed. This was a tool to shape how Hamilton City and the neighbouring communities within Waipa and Waikato districts grow and develop in the long term. It would help Waikato District Council address the current and future challenges faced by the metro area, from declining water quality in the Waikato River and its major tributary, the Waipa River. For Waikato District Council, Ngaruawahia, Hopu Hopu and Taupiri area was identified as a priority development area for urban growth, and Horotiu Freight Hub for growing jobs and contributing to the economic corridor. The Metropolitan Spatial Plan uses a growth scenario where the population of the metropolitan area is expected to double to 500,000 people. 30% of this growth is expected to fall within the Waikato and Waipa districts. And of that 30%, 50% needs to be provided through infill and intensification of existing urban areas. The Metropolitan Spatial Plan, like the Corridor Plan, has no legal standing and was not consulted on. It included high-level strategic focus areas, but again did not have a granular land use pattern. The Metropolitan Spatial Plan was approved by the Future Proof Implementation Committee in 2020. In 2020, Waikato District Council's Growth and Economic Development Strategy was created. This provided a long-term 50-year plan to achieve the Council's vision of creating livable, thriving and connected communities. It saw the combination of our existing development strategy and our economic development strategy into one document. Waikato 2070 is based around 4 key themes, which focus on growing our communities, building our businesses, embracing our identity, and empowering our people. Waikato 2070 is important for the district as it identifies spatially with some detail future growth areas over the short, medium and long terms. The spatial plan of uses is in response to the issues such as where our towns are growing and where future employment areas should be located. Waikato 2070 contains development plans for each of the identified growth towns and villages. The development plans set out land use by identifying growth cells, building typology and density, as well as the development timeframe. The identification and location of growth cells were informed by all previous planning processes. This was the first time Waikato District Council had a more detailed spatial plan that articulates where growth will be located within each town. There are some growth cells identified in Waikato 2070 that were not identified in the Hamilton to Auckland Corridor Plan, and this was for a variety of reasons. The development plans identify areas that are both within the proposed plan, but in some instances have a difference in density and beyond what is intended in the proposed plan, as it takes a longer view. Key points of difference between Waikato 2070 and the proposed plan is the identification of a medium density zone located around existing town centres and future transportation hubs for rail and bus. Town centre areas where retail is envisaged on ground floors and a mix of commercial and residential located on subsequent floors up to 4 stories. Waikato 2070 identifies substantial growth areas for employment land throughout the district. Historically, structure plans, plan changes, and private plan changes have focused on residential land supply. We know there is a shortfall of industrial and business land in the Waikato, with many of our residents commuting to Hamilton or Auckland for employment. Waikato 2070 was prepared using the special consultative procedure under the Local Government Act, which saw district-wide consultation, submissions, and a hearing. In 2020, Waikato District Council embarked on updating the strategic agreement between Hamilton City Council. This was in relation to land transfer areas. It updated the previous agreement that was dated in 2005. Both councils agreed that the triggers set out in the 2005 document were no longer fit for purpose. The timing and transfer request for areas HT1, R2 and WA is now flexible and at the sole discretion of the Chief Executive of Hamilton City Council. Future-Proof in 2019 revised their partnership as a result of completing the Hamilton to Auckland corridor work to include central government, Mana Whenua, Kaitiaki Forum, Auckland Council and the Waikato District Health Board. The strategy is currently under review for updating, and this will incorporate the Hamilton to Auckland Corridor Plan and the Hamilton to Waikato Metropolitan Spatial Plan. It will also seek to implement some of the NPSUD policies, but Future-Proof acknowledges a further update will be required prior to 2024's long-term plan to ensure it meets the NPSUD requirements of a future development strategy. I have some maps which show the difference between the urban limit boundaries between 2009 and 2017, as well as depicting the Waikato 2070 growth areas. I'm not sure if it's helpful. I could provide an example to the panel.
I think it would be helpful to provide an example, and I think I'll signal now. I don't think we're going to have any questions of this, because this is, I mean, it's information that's sort of been available in various places up until now, but this is all new as this package. So we'll wait till we get that in writing. and we would like it to be not just sort of rough speaking notes, but actually presented like it was more of a statement of evidence, so that we can be confident that we've seen it all and we don't have to go back to the transcript all the time to see what you've said. But yes, I think it would be good just to show an example, please.
So the example I've got on the screen is for the township of Raglan. The blue dotted line is the indicative urban limit in the 2009 future-proof document and in the Waikato Regional Policy Statement. The red dotted line is the indicative urban limit that was updated in 2017 future-proof. And then we've got in the yellow colour some of the growth sales identified in Waikato 2017.
Okay, no, that's helpful. Thank you. I see it says page 11 of 11 on that. Do you want to show us just quickly? I think we understand the colours from what you've just said. I assume they're probably similar. So that's to Kowhai.
To Kowhai.
Yeah.
Horotiu.
Yeah.
Ngaruawahia.
We'll hear about that shortly. Yep, thank you.
Taupiri.
Yeah.
Huntley.
Yeah.
Te Kowhata. Midi, Mercer, Pocono, and Tuako.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, those maps are very, very helpful to give you a spatial understanding of the different changes, because there's a few questions I was going to ask Ms. Tracy. There's you almost get dizzy with the amount of documents and strategic documents that have been summarised, but those maps do seem to show the changes under the most relevant recent documents. So I'm wondering whether they are going to be put up on the website.
I think we should.
Included in Ms. Tracy's statement of evidence that she will provide to you.
That'll be good. I think it's important that they're attached. I think we're all on the same page. Read that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, so you're done, Ms. Tracy?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next presenter on behalf of Council is Dr. Mark Davey, the Growth and Analytics Manager. He's the author of the original and supplementary framework report. His presentation today will focus on the supplementary report, as it provides further detailed data on the supply of housing and business land in the district.
And that's his report dated 28 April.
Right.
That's right. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, before we do that, can I just ask a couple of questions of Ms. Tracy on her summary she's given?
Sure.
So okay. I apologise for jumping in there, Commissioner Cooney.
Okay. It's all right. Look, you mentioned in your evidence that there was a growth strategy in 2009, and that was the growth strategy that was put into the regional policy statement. That over the top of that was some sort of forecast, you said, for the whole of the Waikato district. What were those figures there that was estimated then?
So there was the Waikato district had a growth strategy in 2009, and then I think you're referencing the future-proof growth strategy, also dated 2009.
Yeah.
So that had forecasting numbers identified in it, and those were the forecasting numbers that went into the Waikato Regional Policy Statement.
And what was the total? What was the total? You gave some figures as the estimate then predicted for growth in the Waikato district. You gave some figures.
Yeah, so the future proof expected had a projection of 86,600 by 2061. Our most recent forecasting for the same time frame sees us potentially reach between 128,000 and 149,000 people.
So those predictions back in 2009 are really well out of date, aren't they?
Well, I think it's important to note that the 2009 figures didn't include the portion of Franklin district that we got. So there are some projections that were identified in the Franklin district growth strategy. But if you were to go back and look at what Franklin district projected for Pocono, for example, the township has already far surpassed the projection now that was anticipated in 30 years' time.
But whatever way you want to slice and dice it, there's a considerable increase in the forecast for the whole district compared to back in 2009.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep, that's correct.
And so if we can just go to, you've mentioned a number of documents and studies that have been done, and some of them have been, there's been no consultation. From our perspective, what, in your view, are the living strategic documents that we should be having regard to? Is it the 2017 future-proof growth study that was consulted on, and also the 2070? So what's to guide us? What documents should we have regard to? Some that you've said haven't been consulted on, and some have.
Yeah, so documents that have been consulted on are the future-proof strategy and its variations over time. However, the update in 2017 wasn't to future-proof. The consultation wasn't as extensive as what was undertaken in 2009.
Okay, and the 2070.
So that had a very comprehensive consultation process, which included a roadshow around the district, a submission period, and we also decided to hold a hearing and hear the views of the submitters.
Okay. Thank you.
What just to be clear too, I think once we get the written statement, and hopefully we can get that before the hearing finishes, if there are any questions on the written statement, then we'll ask them at that time as well, once we've actually seen it in writing.
Okay.
Is that going to be feasible to get that by midday tomorrow, let's say, or early after lunch at the latest?
Yes, that's fine.
That'd be great. All right, thank you.
Just one more question, Mr. Chairman. The proposed district plan was based on what study? The demand projections.
The proposed district plan largely was still reliant on projections from 2013 census. So we were still, we hadn't had a new census due to the delay in census from the Christchurch earthquake. So projection numbers were out of date at the time of undertaking the proposed district plan.
But I'm talking about the what strategic documents did it rely on for all the zone extensions and changes? What strategic document did the proposed plan rely on?
It relied on Future Proof, the Waikato Regional Policy Statement, and subsequent the structure plans that council had undertaken. When
you say future proof, are you saying as well the updated 2017?
I think it probably included a small portion of the update, but the proposed plan was well underway and written by the time the update to Future Proof in 2017 was done.
So yeah, okay. So yeah, okay. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Parham.
Thank you. So as I was saying, Dr. Davey will focus on the supplementary framework report and just give you a highlights package of what that means in terms of the national policy statement on urban development. If all of the Section 42A authors' recommendations on zoning is to be approved by the panel.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Dr. Davey.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So look, I don't want to sort of go through it in too much detail. I'd probably prefer to leave it over to questions from the panel, taking it as read, although I make just a few sort of top line comments if I may.
By all means.
So the first is in terms of the population projections, and obviously the modelling is underpinned by the medium household projection. Now, different towns will obviously track differently according to that, and I outline in the report the issues in terms of the granularity when you get down to that township level. But effectively what that means is that it's quite possible that some towns will track along a high projection and others could well track along a low or a medium. So that analysis is obviously included in the report. To aggregate or to provide a better understanding comprehensively at a township level, we've looked to the greater kind of urban area. And by that I mean we take Huntly, for example, and then we add on the Huntly rural SA2 area surrounding that to give you an understanding of the wider growth likely to occur. So the analysis overall, I mean, referring to figure 16 in the supplementary report, provides a summary of what that looks like with respect to demand plus the 20% in PSUD requirement and the reasonably expected to be realised supply. And obviously I talk about the formulas or the assumptions that are built in to get to that point. The outcome is one that obviously some of the towns are just meeting that demand or just falling below. So notably, obviously, Pocono, Kowhai, Ngaruawahia are all sort of there or thereabouts. Others such as Turco, obviously there's larger variances there. Raglan obviously picked up some of the further sort of supplementary or rebuttal evidence that comes from that. Absolutely acknowledge the fact that yes, it's a holiday town, and yes, that the way in which the data is collected to inform the usual resident household population count doesn't take account of the holiday demand for there. So I absolutely accept the demand for houses is quite possibly higher there. Turning now to the employment zone capacity and things there. Obviously from an NPSUD point of view, we typically report on that from a hectareage point of view. I've included in the report an analysis in terms of lots. So from my point of view, I think lots is a more sort of a better reference point. That's what's traded, that's what's sold on the market or available. And so I suppose the point there is the fact that yes, hectareage in terms of vacancy is quite significant, but what actually is available is a lot less than that, and suggesting here that it's insufficient across most of the district as to what's actually readily available on the market. There's been some comments come through in terms of the realisation factor that's applied to the greenfield areas. So obviously in the report I used 100% realisation factor, but certainly acknowledging that those greenfield areas that aren't all in single ownership, or where a developer might not be in there already, the realisation factor is likely to be less. So obviously, we're able to tweak those inputs into the modelling, and that'll obviously skew the outcome or change the outcome. But generally, it's the level of vacancy across both residential and employment is pretty strong in my view. I think I'll leave it there, Mr. Chair, and I'll take questions from the panel.
All right, thank you, Dr. Davey. Let's see if there are any questions. Mr. Fulton?
No, sorry, I don't have any questions at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gibb?
No questions, but very interesting data and mapping. I enjoy looking at the maps. It shows it very clearly what you've done there. Thank you.
Ms. Cedric?
Nothing from me, thank you.
Mr. Marg?
Nothing from me, thank you.
Mr. Cooney?
Yes, I got a few questions, but you mightn't be able to provide the information straight off. So, but they really stem from the reports you've done. And by the way, thank you very much for all the information you've gathered together to put in those reports. We may not all agree with some of the outcomes predicted, but there's a lot of information there, and so a lot of it's been very helpful. So thanks very much. But I do struggle with trying to quantify matters just using graphs. So please bear with me. Look, can you let's start off with a line of questions based on your graphs, and I'm taking it at a higher level. What is the predicted household demand for the district under the NPSUD in terms of short-term, medium-term and long-term?
Bear with me, I'm sorry I don't have that number.
Yeah, well, you'd have to go and try and work that out.
No, I can tell you it's in the report. Just bear with me a second. So the table 11, page 20. Okay.
Would it be helpful if I share the screen so you can refer to that? Would that help, Mr. Cooney?
Yeah, that'd be helpful.
Let me know when that's there. Can you see that?
Yeah, you'd have to bring it up a bit.
You can see it, but you can't read it.
Yeah, increase it. Yeah, that's
that.
better. Yeah, perhaps a little bit more. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Okay, could you just take us through those?
So starting from the left, obviously I've used the starting year as 2021, assuming that the plan sort of adopted this year, made operative. So 2,263 is the number for the short term in terms of demand. So it's under table 11. Moving to 7,386 in the short and medium term period, so 2021 to 2031. I've looked at the 15-year time frame, so 2021 to 2036, which is 10,610 household demand. Now, I explained the rationale for that time period in the report. And then looking further to the short-term, medium-term and long-term demand, which is 2021 to 2046, is 16,165.
Yeah. So if we take you've taken for the long term, the 2021 to 2036, haven't you, in your report?
Yeah, that's correct, Mr. Kearney. I worked on the basis of a 15-year planning horizon. Yes.
So out till then, we need 10,610 more houses. Is that right?
Well, plus the 20% demand. So if you look on the table to the right, net change in demand plus 20%.
Yeah.
So it's 12,732 over that 15-year period.
Okay. That's very helpful. Okay, so taking from there, what household capacity does the proposed district plan provide for in the district?
Good question. So probably refer back to some of the earlier tables in the report in terms of the household supply. So hold on, let me just find you a figure reference. So if we look at figure 14, sorry, just bear with me. Proposed district plan market feasible versus, page 15. So I'm hoping this is the right one I just pointed you to. And it's up there. I'm not sure if it's answering your question or not, Mr. Kearney, but this is obviously looking at the proposed district plan in terms of the market feasible capacity. Versus,
what are we looking at here? This is just a breakdown, isn't it? What's the total looking for under the proposed district plan? If you have to, you might have to go away and let us know.
Yeah, so no, I haven't actually got that graph in here. Sorry, Mr. Kearney.
Okay, and what household capacity does the proposed district plan provide with the 42A recommendations that are likely to be realised in short term, medium term and long term? Yeah, able to provide that?
So for that, I'll refer you to page 5, figure 1. And so that's effectively the household demand plus 20%, which is what we were just looking at over the 15-year time period.
That's that big graph there.
Yes, yeah. And versus the reasonably expected to be realised supply. Now that's obviously taking into account the Section 42 recommendations. That's not as it stands at the moment. But happy to go away and pull that data for you if you like.
Are you able, because I could take you through, I don't want to waste everyone's time, but it's the same for employment land. Are you able to just give us sort of a couple of lines on each comparison? What I'm trying to do is really show, well, what is the predicted household demand for the district over the NPS periods of short term, medium term and long term, and you present a figure, and then to say, well, what does the proposed district plan provide as notified, and then what does the 42A recommended changes provide, so we can all get a proper snapshot picture of that. I know your graphs try and do it, but I find them rather difficult to put together.
Absolutely, Mr. Kearney. I think if we sort of go away and come back with answering those specific requests, it'll be much more efficient way of doing it.
Yeah, and the same with employment land as well.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think we're looking for district totals as opposed to town by town by town by town, because that information I think we can see relatively clearly. It's the district as a whole picture that's a little bit harder to tease out, as it were.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just comment on that point. I think at a district-wide level, it becomes a little more debatable as to what's in and what's out because of the quantum of capacity within the rural zone, within the district.
No, but I think if you do that on the basis of what the notified plan said, because that's a given, you know, that is what it is, and so are the 42A report recommendations. That at least gives us 3 points on a curve, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's correct. But carving out the rural capacity, just to confirm, or not?
Well, I think maybe you want to do that as a with and without, so that we've at least got what you think those various numbers are.
Yes. Yeah, no,
that makes sense. I mean, we're particularly looking though at the things that are realizable, I would have thought. So the graph that's on the screen at the moment talks about reasonably expected to be realized. That's what I think, in the whichever way you express that, that's what we're keen to understand. And without putting too, you know, making it seem like a real rough way of expressing it, we're looking to be able to say, look, under low, medium and high, or sorry, under a growth scenario for the short, medium and long term, we've either got just enough, nowhere near enough, miles too much, just a little bit more than we need, etc. You know, it's that context that we're really looking for you to help us with.
Yep, understand. Perfect.
All right. Anything else from you, Mr. Cooney?
Yes, just briefly. Yes, your realization factor. What can you just take us through? What did you apply, and how did you apply it? Because somewhere along the line, you've said in your first report that there should be a 50 up to 50% a factor put in for those identified areas, because they may not get realized. So in your more recent report, this one we're talking to, can you explain what the realization factor is for greenfield, for medium density and for infill, etc.?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So if we just split out the two things, the latest supplementary report uses the 4-step MPSUD market feasible, market realisation sort of tests, right? And that is it zoned? Is it infrastructure ready? Is it market feasible? And then is it reasonably expected to be realised? So the earlier report, framework report, talked more globally about the fact that if you start out with a bit of zoned land, you're likely to end up with, say, 50% actual houses or yield on that relative to what that land area could accommodate on paper, if you like. So I suppose there's two different approaches, but actually I think if I end up in a very similar position, either applying the 50% up front or stepping through the 4-step MPS approach. In terms of the 4-step MPS approach, to get to the reasonably expected to be realised, I applied a 10% factor, or rather around the other way, a 90% redundancy on the market feasible number. So effectively you get your zoned land, you assume it's infrastructure ready, you then determine if it's market feasible. From that market feasible stock, I've assumed 10% of that is reasonably expected to be realised.
It's quite a conservative figure, isn't it?
So I drew on some evidence from Wellington City and Auckland in respect to the yields that they're actually realising, and thought that was actually about right given the nature of the district. But happy to debate that.
Yeah, and is that 10%, right across the board on average, greenfield, medium density residential zone that's proposed, and also infilling brownfield areas, does it?
Yeah, Mr. Keane, that's a good point, and sorry, I should have clarified. So that 10% realisation factor is only being applied to the medium density and infill areas. It's not being applied to greenfield. So greenfield is being assumed at closer to a 1-to-1 realisation rate.
So that's 100%.
That's correct. Yeah. So
there's why the disparity between 10% only for medium density and 100% for greenfield areas?
Oh, because of the market dynamics underpinning the ability to realise plan-enabled yield from an area that's already developed versus one which might be greenfield in single ownership. There's a whole lot of hurdles to obviously develop in the brownfield, not least of which is the market feasibility of it, versus that of a greenfield where you've got a known developer with the wherewithal to develop it.
Is it, and I think a submitter raised this point, isn't it a little bit contradictory that you've got 100% for greenfield, and yet in your first report you said, well, you got to put up to about 50% discount factor?
So yeah, no, I take your point. So I think the thing is that in the district with many of the submitters, those greenfield areas are large. They're in single ownership. So those barriers or hurdles to that capacity being realised in many instances are slight compared to the brownfield areas.
Okay. And when you say infrastructure ready, what do you mean by that and determine its feasibility or realisation feasibility? What do you mean by infrastructure ready?
So the term is in the NPSUD, and that's what I'm referring to. So without having it in front of me, I think it's something in respect to funding. Either the infrastructure is planned or it's in the ground, and it has to be within a long-term plan. So there has to be funding committed to it.
What about the fact that LTPs change every 3 years from, I think, and you may get an area zone without infrastructure, but it's then put in to the LTP at a later date?
I think that's a very, very good point, and we traversed that through the framework report in January, and also with the zone or area specific section 42 authors. And that is at the Waikato district, we're investing in trunk infrastructure and into a network. So for example, the Huntly wastewater network, or the Ngaruawahia Huntly wastewater network. We're relying on the developers to provide the localised infrastructure. So long as you're generally within the urban area, or sort of within those future-proof urban limits, for want of a better description, you're able to connect into Waikato District Council trunk mains. And that's also reflected in our sort of development contribution catchments. I'm happy to provide you the links to those.
So it's based on those that infrastructure that's actually in the ground at the moment, is it?
So there's an assumption. So if I just unpack it slightly, so there's an assumption built into our LTP around all our major towns that they're going to grow by X amount, whatever that amount's going to be, and that commensurate level of investment is going to go into those systems, whether it be roads or waters or whatever it may be, to support that quantum of growth. Obviously not in all cases do we know exactly where that growth is going to materialise on the ground, but trunk infrastructure and headworks investment is either being made or has been made to support that level of growth in those areas. It's when we get outside of those where there's no trunk infrastructure or where there is kind of left field growth, if you like, that wasn't in any of our projections, which is where we run into trouble.
All right, thanks for that. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Cooney. I don't think I have any questions. Thank you, Dr. Daly. I think that extra information that you're going to provide will be helpful. And thanks for the detailed report. It's very helpful. So I think now the plan is to take a 10-minute break because the council team need to rejig some technology, I believe. So we'll please don't log off, stay where you are, turn your videos off and sound off, and we'll resume sharp at 2:30, please. Thanks everyone, we're back in business. So not sure which order the 42A report authors wish to proceed under, but we'll leave that to you, bearing in mind that we have read your summary statements. They're very helpful, but I think it would be helpful if you actually read those out, because I think it'll give everybody on the call a very clear sense of where you're at.
Thank you, Chair. If I can kick things off, just a reminder again, my name is Justine Ashley and I'm the 42A report author for the townships of Ngaruawahia, Taupiri and Horotiu.
Thank you.
So I have provided an opening statement put on the website this morning. Basically, the purpose of this is to provide a brief overview of the settlement pattern within each of these townships within the proposed district plan. It also highlights any infrastructure and hazard constraints, urban growth, and outlines the basis for my recommendations on submissions addressed in this 42A report. Now, I thought it would be useful if I shared the screenshot of the maps in my opening statement. So that
Yes, that would be helpful. Thank you. I was going to do that for you, but you fire away.
Hopefully I can make it work.
If you can't, I've got it here and can do that. But
can you see that?
Yeah, if you can make it, I think if you just make it a little bit big, yes, we can, but just press the plus button a couple. I think that's, yep, I think we get that. That's good. Thank you.
Okay, so overview, Ngaruawahia comprises mostly residential activities, including a large area of country living adjacent to both the Waipa and Waikato rivers. Commercial activities are centred around the business town centre, with opportunities for industrial development being primarily provided adjacent to Great South Road and the North Island main track railway line through the middle of the township. The proposed plan zoning pattern largely reflects that of the operative district plan, with the exception of extensions to the residential zone in the vicinity of the Galbraith Street and Star Road to the north, which is this area up here, and River Road immediately to the north of the Waikato River, just within this red circle here, and the Sulbury Road area to the south, which is down in this area here. So these urban growth areas are consistent with those identified through the structure plan process undertaken in 2017, future-proof strategy, both the 2009 and 2017 versions, and more recently through Waikato 2017. The population, household and land capacity report prepared by the council in December 2020 show that the number of households in Ngaruawahia needs to increase from the current 2,500 to approximately 5,400 over the next 30 plus years to meet the NPS UD requirements. And that's based on the medium growth projection plus 20% additional capacity. And while some infill is anticipated to meet this demand, the majority is reliant on the continued uptake of existing zoned urban zone land and new greenfield subdivisions within boundaries. So in terms of infrastructure, there were no specific infrastructure and servicing constraints identified through the structure plan process, with any additional capacity requirements needing to be addressed through the council's infrastructure asset management plans and the long-term plan. Does include an upgraded intersection where Great South Road meets Silbury Road at the southern end of the town in this facility here. In terms of natural hazard risk, it is recognised that a high flood risk area, and that's as proposed by stage 2 of the district plan process, has been identified over some of the residential growth areas that have been zoned in the proposed plan. However, the extent of this hazard risk and that of the floodplain management area is fairly limited, with part of the River Road growth area on the northern side of the Waikato River affected. That's up in this area here. And a Waipa River overland flow path extending into the new Silbury Road urban area, which is sort of along in this area here. So in terms of submissions, overall, there was a wide range of submissions seeking a range of relief sorts. So I haven't sought to summarise those here, but generally I've recommended in support of those submissions that seek to retain the residential zoning where this is consistent with the overarching Waikato Regional Policy Statement, which approved settlement pattern, where it's identified as a potential growth cell within Waikato 2070 and is supported by technical assessments undertaken as part of the structure plan process. I've also recommended in support of the rezoning of the residential areas in central Ngaruawahia to a medium density residential zone to facilitate intensification opportunities as identified in Waikato 2070. I recommended opposition to those rezoning requests that have provided insufficient technical information to ensure a sustainable development outcome is achieved, including consideration of whether a future urban zone is appropriate. I've also recommended opposition to those rezoning requests that could potentially conflict with the foreseeable long-term needs for expansion of existing urban areas. So also no other submissions relating to the southern Ngaruawahia area and the Silbury Road residential growth area down in here. Mr. Simon Upton's submission to reduce the extent of the residential zone in this locality is supported by both expert landscape and planning evidence. Overall, I consider that as the site-specific constraints of this growth area were investigated through the structure plan process and can be addressed at the time of subdivision, the urban development of the area will give effect to the regional policy statement and provide additional housing capacity to satisfy the NP's UD requirements. However, I have recommended some minor adjustments to the zone boundary to reflect the structure plan and plan change 17, primarily just in this vicinity here. So if I move on to Horotiu. Horotiu is a small settlement located on the northern edge of Hamilton, with the southern part of Horotiu being located within Hamilton City's territorial boundary. It has good accessibility to Hamilton City, with an interchange access to the Te Rapa bypass, and it is also located on the main trunk railway line. Horotiu has therefore been identified as a substantial hub for industrial development for the southern Waikato region, including the long-standing Afro meat processing work site, and provision for new industrial activities within the Northgate Business Park and Ports of Auckland Inland Port. Proposed plan zoning pattern largely reflects that of the operative plan, the key change being the rezoning of the Curnot Road area from country living to residential, and that's it is noted that this rezoning does not appear to have been signalled through the Horotiu structure plan process, but it is consistent with future-proof strategy, both 2009 conclusions and Waikato 2017. And it also includes a noise control boundary overlay to minimise the risk of reversing effects on surrounding industrial activities. So again, according to the Council's Population, Household and Land Capacity Report, residential growth in Horotiu is expected to remain relatively modest, with the projected supply being likely to continue to exceed demand for the next 30 plus years. Investing in 1,000 households at a median projection of plus 20%. Conversely, Horotiu is anticipated to continue to promote a strategic industrial hub. The town's contribution towards the district's growth is therefore primarily as an industrial and residential centre. The Horotiu structure plan identified that development of the new residential areas in Horotiu will require extensions to existing water and wastewater reticulation systems, with consideration of the capacity constraints of the existing reticulation pipes. It was therefore anticipated that development of the Kernot Road area will need to be addressed through the Council's infrastructure asset management plans and long-term plan. However, it was found that the roading infrastructure for industrial development at Horotiu was already in place, and that residential development within this settlement was of a scale that could be largely managed with the existing road network. The extent of natural hazard risk associated with flooding from the Waikato River is limited to within the vicinity of the Ngaruawahia Drive Bridge, which is just a little portion up in here. So in terms of submissions relating to Horotiu, I've recommended and again in support those submissions seeking to retain the residential zoning. This is consistent with the overarching Waikato Regional Policy Statement, proof Waikato 2070, and supported by technical experts that undertaken as part of the structure plan. I recommended against those rezoning requests that have provided insufficient technical information to ensure sustainable development. In addition, I note that the Northgate Developments, Northgate Industrial Park and Dixon Family Trust submissions have sought a substantial expansion of the industrial zone to the southwest of the existing industrial park, which basically incorporates all this land out into here. With this area also being identified as being needed for industrial growth in Waikato 2070. However, given that neither submitter has provided any evidence in support of the considering that a logical extension to the zone would also incorporate several blocks held by parties that have not lodged submissions, which would include this area here. The provision of additional industrial land at Horotiu may need to be revisited following the process. I also note that the southwest Horotiu industrial area is located in relatively close proximity to the Rotokauri area, which my colleague Jonathan Cleves has that we submitters are seeking to rezone a large greenfield block for over 3,000 homes.
Ashley, sorry to interrupt you at this point. Would you mind just sitting a little bit closer to the microphone? Because just every now and again you're cutting out, and I think it's because it's not picking your voice up clearly.
Oh, sorry. I've also got a cold, sorry, so I'm aware, but
No, you're louder already.
Oh, good.
That's good. Thank you.
Trying to fit my colleague in the same picture before. Okay, so let's move through to Taupiri. So Taupiri is zoned predominantly for residential activities in the proposed plan, with limited amounts of business zoning located in and around the town centre. There is a small pocket of country living zone on the northeastern side of Ngaruawahia stream, which is this area up in here. The proposed plan zoning pattern largely reflects that of the operative plan, with the exception of extensions to the residential zone to the south of the township off Button Lane, which is in this area, and at the end of Murphy Lane, down in this vicinity, as shown in those red circles. So these are also areas that are consistent with the Taupiri structure plan, future-proof strategy, both versions, and Waikato 2070. So in terms of infrastructure, the council's supply and demand, oh, sorry, not up to that yet. The council's supply and demand analysis for Taupiri shows a projected increase from the current 250 households to approximately 1,700 over the next 30 plus years as a contribution to meeting the district's NPS-UD requirements. Much of the residential growth earmarked for Taupiri is anticipated to occur within the Kainui Road Greenfield growth area, which actually extends down. This is, sorry, here. This is Kainui Road here. So it takes in all of this area up in here. Taupiri has also been signalled as providing for an increase in the supply of industrial land, with a new industrial hub being identified on both sides of the Waikato Expressway in 2070, albeit that this land sits outside future proof 2017. Overall growth in Taupiri is relatively modest. In percentage terms, it represents a significant increase in the size of this area, with the scale and character of Taupiri changing from that of a village to become a larger township. The Taupiri Structure Plan recognises that the development of new residential areas will require extensions to existing water and wastewater reticulation systems in consideration of the capacity constraints of existing reticulation pipes. It is also identified that the development of the new residential area between Murphy Lane and Button Lane will require at least one connecting link road across the gully and restoration work on the main gully system that enables it to serve as an important stormwater and amenity function. In addition to the discharge of stormwater, the gully is intended to be a significant natural open space area linking to the adjacent road and footpath network. The proposed plan also identifies that the gully system between Murphy Lane and Button Lane contains tracts of Indigenous biodiversity worthy of protection as a significant natural area, and also includes a Māori site of significance. As such, these values will need to be recognised and protected as part of any future development proposal. In terms of natural hazard risk, there are no high flood risk areas or floodplain management areas as identified in stage 2 of the proposed plan. Identified over any of the new growth areas that have been zoned in the proposed plan. In terms of submissions, I've recommended that the 2 submission points seeking to rezone land in and around Taupiri be rejected, primarily because insufficient technical information has been provided to ensure a sustainable development outcome is achieved, and that's either through live zoning or by way of a future urban zone, and or the land is outside the settlement pattern identified in future-proof strategy 2009 and 2017 versions, and or Waikato 2070, and is therefore not supported by the higher order planning framework. That's the end of my summary statement, but obviously I have a 100-page 42A report there, which has got very detailed analysis of individual submission points, so I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
All right, let's. I'm sure there will be some questions. Let's just start that process now, Mr. Marg.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. No actual questions from me. Thank you.
Ms. Gibb.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Just a couple of questions. I noticed you said that in Taupiri in particular, the future-proof 2009 and 2017 doesn't fit with the applicants that have come through for asking for extra residential land. And I'm just wondering how much emphasis did you put on considering the fact that the Waikato Expressway is now opened and it's a different situation here in 2021 as it was in those years when those future-proof versions were developed, because in the last little while there has been some changes with transport around the area. So how much emphasis did you put on considering those things?
Yes, I'm certainly aware of that. I guess if I just bring up that, I think I've got my future-proof map here. So this is the 2017 version. It shows the extent of the village or indicative village urban limit. I might need to zoom in, so do I? There, which obviously shows, so the area that's in Waikato 2070 is on, as you mentioned, either side of the expressway there. I guess the difficulty I had dealing with that is that obviously the district plan also needs to give effect to the regional policy statement, which at this stage refers to the future-proof settlement pattern, actually back to the 2009, and actually in the regional policy statement. It's fairly clear in terms of the urban limits that urban growth needs to be contained within those areas. So I guess at this point, while I'm aware that there's obviously more work going on in that space, ideally if the future-proof is updated to include those industrial areas, and then that was subsequently implemented through a change to the regional policy statement, and then that would provide a pathway for the district plan to give effect to it. But this stage, I was concerned that that would be some of those higher order documents.
Yes, sorry, it is quite hard to hear you. There's something not quite right with your sound, but I think I got that. The other thing I was interested in was you are discounting some of the submissions because there's no structure plan or detailed technical reports. So if there had been structure plans and detailed technical reports, would that have changed your view?
Oh, most definitely, yes.
So if it was zoned future urban, for example, there'd have to be an opportunity at that point for any submitter to put in these structure plans to the council, who would obviously need to look at all the technical information. And that would be the same point, I guess, for all of the other towns that you've mentioned, Ngaruawahia as well. And thinking back to Mr. Davies' comment about how much easier it is to have residential development in greenfields as opposed to brownfields, we perhaps need to turn our mind to where is it more likely to be working better and quicker, realisation than where it isn't. And that this is another opportunity, I guess, for greenfields. But I'm interested in your opinion between the brownfields and the greenfields.
Yes, most certainly. That I think even with the future urban zone, still requires a plan change to live zone the land through that process. But it obviously clearly signals that it is a residential growth area. And a statutory document as opposed to the non-statutory strategies that identify. I guess another example is in terms of Ngaruawahia is probably down within this area here, which is, I just wonder if well, at the moment it's zoned country living. If I go back to my, make sure that I'm on the right map here. In terms of, so this area in here is obviously identified for intensification, but again, it's just in terms of coming back to it was limited by the scope of submissions. There is a submission related to this area, but it only seeks to go from residential to village zone. So it's really, I suppose, trying to get sufficient scope and technical information to support the preparation of a structure plan or an outline development plan to show how that development could be achieved, to give enough assurance in terms of live zoning those areas.
Yes, I think from memory there were some submissions further down. If you moved your arrow down across to the Waipa and near the N on Ngaruawahia, I think that there were also some submissions to reduce the size of that country living area into more urban, from memory. So they would need to have structure plans, what you're saying. We would have to look at that in a wider context.
Yes, actually there was, I think there was a couple of just some minor adjustments relating to some site specific properties down in this area. But there was another submission, for example, to turn all of the country living areas right up, my map doesn't go far enough there, right up beside the Waikato into again, a village zone. So I think ideally in terms of intensification for greenfield areas, it is accompanied by an ODP particularly, or a structure plan, I think as it's referred to in this context, particularly where you've got multiple landowners that are involved, and it's really just trying to make sure that the development occurs in an integrated manner and that all the constraints are addressed efficiently.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Ms. Ashley.
Thank you. Ms. Sedgwick?
Those last remarks were very helpful. Thank you. I don't have any further questions.
Mr. Fulton?
Yes, thank you. Just, I may not have picked it up, but Mr. Davies' report might show it somewhere I haven't got yet, but I haven't picked it up. But to meet the National Policy Statement on urban growth, in the whole of this plan, and I know you've just got Ngaruawahia, Horotiu and so on, how much has been applied for and how much would we need to meet those standards? And it's going to be interesting to see if that figure was available, and if it would, it could be very helpful to us following on from the questions from Mr. Cooney this morning, so, or a bit earlier on the day. Is there a map of that? You may not have it, but Mr. Davey may, or somebody else. Just interesting to know what the applications are and how much would be required to satisfy the national policy statement on urban growth.
Yeah, I might leave that for Mr. Davey to address specifically, but I think his conclusions with respect to Ngaruawahia is that it was sort of there or thereabouts in terms of meeting those requirements.
Okay, thank you. Yes, no, I was just asking as a general question, and I expect Mr. Davey would pick up on that. Okay, thank you, and thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Cooney.
Yes, thank you. Just in your outline statement here, you referred to a couple of areas like Ngaruawahia, and you say that the capacity report, I think it's 2020, it needs to increase. This is from Ngaruawahia, for example, to increase from the current 2,500 to approximately 5,400 over the next 30 years. The current, when you say current 2,500, is that the existing population there, or is it a plan enabled capacity? Which is it?
I'm referring back to actually the appendix out of the Dr. Davies' original framework report. It was Appendix 9 by memory of his framework report, and he had a series of graphs for each of the townships to show where the growth areas would be. I can refer to that in my 42 report if you'd like.
No, I'm just trying to get a handle on whether that figure that you've referred to, for example, in Ngaruawahia, from the current 2,500, what is that figure? What's it apply to? People living there now, or it's plan enabled?
The description that Dr. Davies used is the current number of households.
Okay, that's the current. So there may be some already zoned capacity in addition to that there that's already zoned residential. Can you infer that?
Yes, I would.
Yeah. But so, and then you go to the actual total. So we don't know how much additional capacity is required to accommodate those figures over and above what is currently plan enabled.
Well, he has assigned various I guess household numbers to each of the growth cells that's presented in the Waikato 2070 in the graph, but that's what I'll highlight on. Okay,
well maybe Mr. Davey can clarify that at some point. But you mentioned in response to Commissioner Gibbs' questions about you seem to have relied, or you seem to infer that you relied on the regional policy statement and its direction there as to where urban boundaries should be. The sort of evidence that we've been getting is that's pretty out of date, based on 2009 projections and identified areas. It's sort of just because, put it another way, you're not trying to tell us that it's an absolute document that we must interpret it pretty strictly.
Well, no, not well. I guess in terms of the urban limits, yes, it has got the 2009 future-proof map still part of the RPS. But I guess they're actually fairly similar, the 2009 and 2017 versions in terms of these townships. The only real difference is probably actually in Taupiri, But to that, I guess I have looked, I guess, more through that and to the Future Proof 2017 as being the most up to date. And I think the regional policy statement does give some room to move there where it can be shown that it's been, I guess, shown to or demonstrated that there is a need and it's been planned and integrated through that process. I think there's policies do enable you to consider that where it's, I think there's some wording there that I did find. So I think there is some flexibility there.
Yeah, you've got your alternative land release provisions in the RPS, haven't you?
Yes, well, that does refer to that, but mainly, I guess, in terms of the industrial land, but it also does, where it's. I think the wording is where it's been through a. I did look at that.
Right. Just with Taupiri, you've suggested that you need a structure plan before you rezone. I think that's what you said to Commissioner Gibb, and you hadn't received those structure plans for a lot of areas. With Future Urban, I thought your colleague, Mr. Cleese, said, well, you don't need a structure plan for Future Urban. I might have got that wrong, but I thought he did. He said that in his overarching report or supplementary report he gave for bringing in Future Urban.
No, that's correct. My comments related to a structure plan were really, I think, need to accompany efforts to be live zoned, ideally. I did consider whether a future urban zone could be applied to Mr. Lovell's land in Taupiri, but the problem I ran into, I think, is that the extent of the submitter's land only comes down. It was only part of the growth cell. It didn't go. Well, it might have been down. I need to find the map, sorry, but it didn't go all the way down to Kainui Road. Kind of just covered one part of it. So while I felt that that was an option, I wasn't sure how far that would get in terms of the overall development of that area.
You've got Mr. Van Dam's land also alongside, haven't you?
Yes, that was, I suppose, I had reservations about that land being outside of Future Proof 2017. And it was also shown in the Waikato 2017 as being suitable for a commercial and industrial purposes rather than residential.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Ashley. I've just got a couple. You mentioned when you were talking about Ngaruawahia, but I think it possibly applies more broadly. You made mention that a small amount of the residentially zoned land was subject to the high risk flood scenario.
Yes.
And obviously this plan was notified before the flood scenario was, because that was stage 2. Do you think if you had that hazard information available when you were looking at the zoning provisions, it would have made any difference to where you would have proposed urbanisation? Would it make any difference overall?
Potentially, although if I just go back to the Ngaruawahia, which is probably where that's of most, so around this River Road area. When I did look at that, the sites are actually large enough that you could still develop a portion of the land up near River Road, but it would basically mean any development subject to that natural hazard area would be non-compliant. But there, obviously, there is still scope to develop parts of those sites.
All right. I just want to take a little bit further the role of the RPS and how you've assessed what it and Future Proof have said. As Mr. Cooney has said, we've had quite considerable evidence before us that says to the effect that future-proof's not a straitjacket. It's you know, reasonably directive in terms of guidance, but it doesn't create absolute bottom lines. And there are alternative land release scenarios that are contemplated. And I suppose that Mr. Cooney sort of drew attention to the Taupiri land of Mr. Lovell and Mr. Van Dam's. I mean, you've said, overall, I consider, this is at paragraph 228 of the 42A report. And I'm only picking on this example because it's not to focus on the merits or otherwise of those two particular proposals, but just as a for instance. You said, overall, I consider that while the small scale of the site means it is not of a scale that would threaten the integrity of the urban growth limit contained in the overarching strategic document, and that it has obvious limitations in terms of the types of rural activities that could be undertaken on it. The same could be said for a multitude of other small sizes across the district. But, and I accept that point, you know, about the death by the 1,000 cuts. But if you have got land that's squeezed and constrained, and I heard what you said in this particular case about it perhaps being industrial rather than residential, but why do we care? What is it? Because future proof doesn't have a line on the map that says it's in or it's out? Is that really the fundamental sticking point from your point of view?
No, could I just clarify that those comments were actually in relation to Mr. Lovell's submission to rezone this little bit of land in here.
Sorry, say that part. Sorry, you cut out. Mr. Lovell proposal to what? Sorry.
To rezone this sliver of land where I've got my cursor on in here. So those.
Okay. Sorry, I might have misread that.
But the Taupiri one is an interesting one, I guess, in terms of it seemingly being in between the strategic documents in terms of, like, it's out the Van Dam land, for example.
Yes.
Future Proof 2070.
Yes.
But it is located within Waikato 2070, but for industrial and commercial uses. And the submissions, I'd have to say that the evidence from the submitters was, I was a bit unclear in terms of the planning evidence seemed to relate to Mr. Lovell's land, but there was less detail when it came to Mr. Van Dam's.
Okay. Sorry, my question stems from a misunderstanding of what it was you were referring to, and you've clarified that, and it was my misunderstanding. So no, that's fine. Thank you. And I don't think I have any more questions. Thank you very much, Ms. Ashley.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, panel. I'll just bear with me. I'll just change the screen sharing so I can find my report rather than Ms. Ashley's. And also, we'll see if we can turn the volume up at our end as well, just to sort of help you hear for a moment.
You're coming through loud and clear. It seems to be. I'm not sure what the reason is, but you're loud and clear at the moment.
I'm talking in a big booming voice.
I want to go back to, yeah.
Okay. Oh, good morning, good afternoon, panel. Yes, sir. My name is Jonathan Cleese. I'm to the 42A report for Te Kowhai. So you obviously got my opening statement. So what I was I'm happy to read through it word for word if you'd like, but I'm likewise happy just to talk to the key points and sort of talk you through it.
I think talk to the key points. Most of this panel has recently sat on the Te Kowhai Air Park hearing, so there's quite a lot of context around a reasonable amount of things. So I don't think you need to read it, bearing in mind that not everyone on this hearing was on that one, but we're in your hands. You don't need to read it out because we have read it. You focus on what you want to highlight for us.
Thank you. Yes, look, I'll talk to the key points, and then I'm very happy to sort of fill in do. So this map in front of you here is the operative plan, but it's a good starting point. So the operative plan initially for the village is just this little pink core in the middle with a school, some shops, a church. As we heard from Ms. Tracy before, there was a structure plan done in 2014, and that gave rise to a plan change which rezoned this olive green area here for country living. So this sort of came through in 2017. And that's sort of where the operative plan kind of got to. The crosshatch up in the north west is an aggregate extraction overlay that in the proposed plan has now been pulled back to just covering the quarry itself, which is sort of just off the top of the picture here. A couple of other things just to quickly note is that there is a gas pipeline that runs north-south. It's sort of the main reticulate gas pipeline for the upper half of the North Island, runs through to the east of the village. The airfield in the operative plan has a rural zone, and you can kind of see the approach slope controls there. And then the only flood hazard area is there's a stream that ultimately connects up to the Waipa River that runs through the country living area and has a walkway along it. And the flood hazard is really a fairly narrow sort of within the channel area. So it's a village area that doesn't have a lot of constraints from a hazard perspective, doesn't have a lot of constraints from a landscape or significant ecological area perspective. So that's sort of the starting point. And then if I come down to the proposed plan included a couple of changes. One was the northwestern country living zone stays country living, and that's largely been subdivided and is in the process of being built out. So that's almost a status quo zone. The country living greenfield area in the operative plan to the northeast changes to a village zone. Again, this area has been partially developed, but still has some quite big development areas that are just sort of gripping up paddocks at the moment. So that's an operative plan that becomes a little bit more intensive. The village zone, the proposed plan also significantly included within these sort of generally these green circles, a large greenfield village area here, and also the big block out to the southwest, which is the Metcalf land. And so that was to go to a village zone. But in the panel who were in hearing 6, it was that considered the village zone, will recall that into Kowhai and also up in Tuakau, where there was a similar greenfield village zone concept proposed, that the rule package has a sort of a transitional approach where you can go unserviced 3,000 square metres with the idea that in the future, when it is reticulated, you can subdivide further down to 1,000 square metres. And there was quite a lot of discussion here in 6 about this transitional approach and how the village zone has a sort of a split personality where, by and large, the zone applies to small, discrete settlements in the district, and it's very much a status quo zone that just recognises existing built form. Whereas into Kowhai and Tuakau, it has these big greenfield growth areas with a transitional approach. So in terms of submissions, I'll break it down to, firstly I'll talk to you quickly about this northern area, then I'll talk about these 2 greenfield village zones, then the airport park concept, and then lastly I'll finish about a about Ngaruawahia. So within the northern area, my recommendation is largely to confirm the proposed plan zoning. So that's this greenfield area here changes from being a country living zone in the operative plan to a village zone, but albeit with a 3,000 square metre limit in the proposed plan, the district plan. Recommended that these growth or submitter areas out here to the northeast that are seeking to go into village zone be declined. And I note that these areas are not shown in either the structure plan for 2014, they're not shown in future proof, they're not shown in Waikato 2017, and no evidence was received from those submitters. The only exception to that is that a discrete block of 3 lots up in this corner here on Bedford Road, where I've recommended that that be rezoned to country living, really just to get a more logical urban boundary to this area. In terms of the big growth areas, the greenfield growth areas, my recommendation is that they both have a future urban zone. This northeastern growth area is shown in the structure plan, is shown in Waikato 2070, and is also shown in the future proof, and therefore is in the RPS. So there's no issue about it going urban in principle. The big issue with this one, and also with the Metcalfe block, is that there's no reticulated servicing, especially for wastewater programs within the next 10 plus years. So it's primarily a wastewater servicing constraint. The Metcalfe block is a little different in that it's not shown in the structure plan, it's not shown in future proof, but it is shown in Waikato 2070. So it's a good example perhaps of the conversation you were having before about whether the RPS and the 2009 future proof is definitive or not. My view of the RPS is that it's perhaps directive but not definitive, where I think it's certainly saying the future-proof boundary is in there for good reason, and generally growth should be in accordance with it. But certainly the MAC 6C in the RPS is titled as an indicative urban boundary rather than a definitive one. And the RPS also contains section 6A, which sets out a whole lot of criteria for where you might contemplate a departure from the future-proof growth areas. And the Metcalfe block, I think, is a good example of that, where it has been shown in Waikato 2070 as sort of the latest, I guess, sort of thinking around growth. Also significantly, the identification of this area as a future urban zone hasn't been opposed by either the regional council or by Hamilton City Council. So it's a good example of I guess the world moving on to a certain extent, the need for additional capacity being recognised, being identified through a public process in Waikato 2070, and where the two of the main statutory partners of that future-proof partnership are comfortable with it having or being signalled for urbanisation in the future. As I said, the key issue for the Metcalfe block is around servicing. And also, if it is live zone, what is that live zone? Their submission is seeking village zone, which goes down to 1,000 square metres, whereas I would view that if it can be reticulated, that actually going to a general residential zone would make far more sense. So we're in agreement between myself and Mr. Holbrook, who's the planner for Mr. Metcalfe, and you'll hear from them tomorrow, that this area is suitable for being identified in principle for urbanisation. My recommendation is that because of this, primarily because of the servicing uncertainty, but also because of the ultimately what the best live zone is uncertainty, it's best done as a future urban zone. Mr. Holbrook thinks, and you'll hear from him, that it could be live zone, potentially with rules around sort of servicing and staging. The third area of submission is the air park down here, where, and as you said, Mr. Chair, that's recently been considered through Hearing 17. So Hearing 17, my understanding, has looked at the rules that apply to the air park zone, and in particular paid attention to the obstacle limitation sort of approach lights, which limits high structures where planes might crash into them, and also included a noise contour with acoustic insulation requirements for sensitive activities that went around the main runway area. So that was Hearing 17. Again, the airfield or the air park is shown within Waikato 2070 as an air park for some form of urban purposes. It's also shown in Future Proof 2017 as being part of the future urban area. So again, strategically, there's no debate about it being shown for some form of urban activity. The question at this point is, I think, around the detail of the rule package that applies to the air park, and in particular about how much housing is appropriate as part of the air park concept. And again, in my view, that's not to do with zone boundary. So the blue boundary, I think, is appropriate for the air park, whether it's just an airfield with aeronautical activity in it, or ultimately, if the panel through Hearing 17 are comfortable with it, including sort of these areas of residential, then pending their servicing in the future, the blue outline, zone outline, doesn't really change. It's more to do with what ultimately the rules are that apply to what you can do in that zone. On the basis that the panel do agree that the air park should be rezoned, I've also recommended that these two lots between the air park and Lima Road have a village zone, which was as sought by the submitters. And that zoning, or that recommendation rather, is opposed by both Hamilton City Council and the Waikato Regional Council. My understanding is that it's essentially a tension between my recommendation, which is, I guess, placing greater weight on creating a logical urban boundary and being relatively small scale, versus Hamilton City Council's and the Waikato Regional Council's view, which perhaps is more of a zoomed out strategic view of a sort of a death by 1,000 cuts. And the original proposition, as I understand it, is that we don't want further village zoning if we can help it, and therefore just in principle they're opposed to this because it is an additional village zone. So I think the panel, you'll be wrestling with us across all the townships around sort of incremental growth and where do you draw the line. So for me, just as I think the Bedford Road area, these 3 lots lead to a more logical urban edge. Doesn't make a lot of difference with capacity either which way, but also is a sufficiently small scale that it doesn't threaten that strategic urban growth. I appreciate that there may well be different views on that. And then lastly, I'll take you through to Roto Kauri, which is a separate geographic area to Kowhai. So this is a little bit zoomed out. Minimize this a little bit. So we've got, so here's the Kowhai here, here's the airfield that we were just talking about. You go east, here's Hamilton City with the expressway. Here's Horotiu that my colleague Ms. Ashley was just telling you about. That's primarily an industrial sort of warehouse distribution hub with AFCO freezing works in there. This is the Samura block in here in red. So it could have just as logically formed part of the Horotiu report. It probably could have formed part of the Hamilton Fringe report. There's no particular science as to who got it. It was really just a workload allocation, so it landed with me. I'll just, with this one, if I just put across to future proof, because this I think is helpful as well, just to set it in context. So it's, whilst it's an isolated area from both to Kowhai and from Horotiu, it does adjoin, the crosshatch here is shown as what are currently greenfield areas within Hamilton City that are subject to a structure plan. So if you jump on Google Earth, this would look like paddocks to the west of the expressway, but there is a structure plan in place that shows it going urban at some point in the future. And the Roto Kauri block is in this big kind of, gap, I guess, in here. So I certainly take the submitter's point that, in the long term, I can understand that this area would warrant further investigation. For me, more a question around timing and process. So, sorry, I'll just sorry. For me, there are a couple of issues with this block. Firstly, it's not shown in any of the strategic documents. So it's not in a structure plan. It's not in Waikato 2070. It's not in either future-proof versions. It's not in the RPS. So it's not shown anywhere. Likewise, the submitter block is only restricted to this red area. So it has this awkward gap in between. So in terms of submission scope, I think there's an issue there in terms of developing a coherent urban area. And then lastly, in terms of the level of detail provided for a submission block of this scale, where ultimately the submitter is saying this area could develop for sort of 3,500 households, is really limited to some high level planning evidence and some transport evidence. So my understanding is that myself and Mr. Batchelor, who gave planning evidence for the submitter, are in agreement that we're not at a point where you could live zone it in terms of the information requirements or indeed the strategic framework. Mr. Batchelor is of the view that it could be appropriately a future urban zone or a Hamilton urban expansion area overlay. This area doesn't form part of the strategic agreement between Hamilton City and Waikato in terms of land that will change to become part of Hamilton's boundary in the future. So in my view, an urban expansion overlay isn't appropriate, and we're just too premature for a future urban area or future urban zone at this point. In my view, it's better for the latest iteration to work its way through the process. The housing trees, and then as a result of this area rig. All that noise is, it's not at mine. Oh,
No, there's something funny going on.
Should be good to go now. I muted them.
No, thank you.
Good man, Fletcher.
Thank you. So yeah, in short, my recommendation is that it remains rural at this point. That I think there's a few more strategic processes to work their way through, and then it may well come back in the future for a plan change that looks not just at this submitter block, but also the intervening gap and the gap between here and Horotiu, with potentially this area up in here, which is shown in Waikato 2070 is going for industrial. So there's I think it's a future sort of bundle of work in this Hamilton Fringe area, but in my view, it would be premature to picture urban zone at this point in time. So that's an overview. Very happy to take questions.
Thanks, Mr. Cleese. Let's see if there are any questions. Ms. Sedgwick?
No, I have no questions, but I do thank you for your report and I found it inordinately interesting.
Thank you. Ms. Gibb?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Marg?
Great report and very useful, and I have no questions. Thank you.
Mr. Fulton?
Yeah, no, thank you. No questions. Thank you.
Mr. Kearney?
Just that block you've got up there on the screen, the large block there, that's about 142 hectares, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, something in that order. Yep.
Okay. What sort of land is it? Is it good productive land or what?
Yes. So it is identified as a, it's a class 2 soil. So there are productive, land or productive soil issues in play. That's not to say that it's any different from these other growth areas around here. And it's sort of to the contour, it's sort of gently rolling. So you could, if you're a farmer, you can get a tractor over most of it.
Is there an element in your assessment? I know it hasn't been identified in the strategic planning documents, but is there also an element here that it's just too big to simply bring in as future urban because it may distort other planned or potentially planned areas? Is that an element as well?
Not so much that it's too big. I think more is that the thinking and analysis to my mind is a bit premature in terms of the Hamilton Fringe area, where it is surprising, given the amount of work that's gone on looking at growth around Hamilton Fringe, it clearly hasn't been identified, and I'm assuming there are reasons for that. And just on the basis of a submission where the evidence was, is fairly high level planning evidence and high level traffic, and that's it. It just feels to my mind premature. And with the scale of it too, as you say, it is a really big block of land. And I think logically, if you were to look at this area, you'd look at it comprehensively. So you take in the gap here, you take the connection up to Horotiu, and you look at the back of Horotiu industrial area as well, and you do something sort of coherently across the whole area.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, it's helpful.
Thank you. And I don't think I have any questions. Thanks, Mr. Cleese. That's pretty clear. The basis for and details of your recommendations to us. I think what we'll do is we'll break for 10 minutes rather than quarter of an hour, and just have a quick stretch our legs and so forth. So we'll resume again at 20 to 4 when we'll hear from Ports of Auckland, followed by Mr. Allen, and then we'll go through the afternoon tea schedule, noting that the Dixon Family Trust aren't appearing after all. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 submitters to hear, and we've got about an hour and a half or just a bit under to hear from them. So we've got plenty of time. So we'll adjourn now, and we'll be back at 22. Please don't log off, just mute your microphone and turn your video off, please. Thank you, everybody. It's 22. Make sure the panel's all present and correct. Ms. Gibbs there, Ms. Sedgwick's there, Mr. Marg. Mr. Fulton, I think, is still not here. There he is. All right. It's Ports of Auckland's time now. Mr. Arbuthnot, thank you. We've read your evidence. We've also read your summary statement. So they're in your hands. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thank you. So given that you've read everything, what I thought I'd do, if I may, is just talk very briefly to my summary statement. And then from there, happy to take any questions. I've prepared a statement of evidence in relation to two further submissions by Ports of Auckland in opposition to some rezoning in Horotiu village, one being by Perry Group from rural to residential, and the other by Mr. Buxton, which was seeking land zoned country living to residential as well. And I think in terms of what my summary statement picks up on, Ms. Ashley has obviously identified or set out her reasons why she's concluded that she doesn't think that it would achieve, the rezoning would achieve the development principles outlined in section 6A of the regional policy statement. But importantly, I think in terms of my evidence, what she does include or does conclude is that additional development capacity is not required within Horotiu to give effect to the national policy statement on urban development in this particular location anyway. And then when you look at the district-wide analysis that was provided by Dr. Davey, he's obviously confirmed his recommendation, the recommended changes by council staff are such that there is sufficient supply to meet housing demand as required by the MPS, albeit with a limited level of headroom. And so where my evidence gets to, and that's with looking at Appendix 9, the household projections in Appendix 9 of the 42A framework report, was that the rezoning of additional land within Horotiu to residential purposes wasn't required to meet the medium-term development capacity requirements of the MPS. My view on this is that the long-term development capacity is better determined through the ongoing strategic planning exercises that are going through the area. And I think Mr. Cleese actually did a very good job in terms of highlighting some of the big picture planning questions that need to be addressed in this Horotiu area, Hamilton Fringe area, in terms of what's happening with the industrial estate, what's happening with other out of zone requests, rezoning requests as well. And my take on that is that it's appropriate to deal with all of these things comprehensively as part of that process. And I say that because obviously, as we've discussed previously in previous hearings, the Horotiu Industrial Park is identified as a strategic industrial node. So it is an area where industrial development is encouraged. And certainly the RPS, when you look at the rezoning principles or the outcomes that it's concerned with, certainly there is a requirement there that new development should not result in incompatible land uses. And similarly with Future Proof 2017, also specifically advises that at Horotiu, that careful consideration needs to be taken when deciding where residential demand is going to be located. So that's why I'm my opinion is that, well, there's still quite a lot of planning to go yet in terms of how this area might develop. And so it's appropriate, because it's long-term development capacity that we're talking about, to deal with it as part of this wider strategic planning that's ongoing. But then, of course, my evidence does conclude as well that if you were to determine that additional land is required and to be rezoned and to give effect to the MPS, then obviously the RPS, my reading of the RPS is that the proposed plan is required to minimise any potential reverse sensitivity effects on the industrial park. And the way to achieve that, or one of the ways to achieve that, or the part to achieve that, would be to ensure that the provisions of the Horotiu acoustic overlay provisions apply to that land. But that's pretty much the top and the bottom of my evidence, and I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
All right, thanks, Mr. Arbuthnot. Let's see how we go with that. Ms. Gibb?
No, it's very clear to me what you asked for, Mr.
Mr. Marg?
No, thank you. Very clear.
Ms. Sedgwick?
No, straightforward as always. Thank you very much. Nothing from me.
Mr. Fulton?
No, and I don't have any questions either. Thank you.
Mr. Cooney?
No, thank you.
No, and I don't either, for the same reasons that my colleagues have said. Thank you, Mr. Arbuthnot.
Thank you.
Which brings us to Mr. Allen, please. We got Mr. Allen there? There he is. You're on mute, Mr. Allen.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thanks for your patience on that. I've been sort of turned off up the top most of the day. For those who weren't here when I introduced myself, I'm using my wife's Zoom account, so it's telling everyone I'm Margarita. But my name is John Allen. The matter that that we're raising, would it be right that the commissioners have actually read the 2-pager?
Yes, I can put it on the screen if you wish.
Speak up a bit louder, Mr. Allen.
Sorry?
Could you come closer to the mic on your...
Is that better?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot better. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah. Yeah, the reason there's a single item that that's developed. Just a bit of background. When the proposed district plan came out, we were quite happy with what it was recommending, and thought it was logical. But since the submissions come out, it was one and possibly a second one opposing. So we thought we should take the initiative to submit our submission as a further submission to the topic. Is Fletcher there?
Yeah, he will be. What is it you want to? What is it you want to show? Do you want to show your 2-pager?
Yeah, well, it's really a map which I thought I could get from your data. From your database.
We are aware of the Upton submission and your concerns about it, but I think it would be helpful to have a map up of Mr. Bell's handy and can put.
What was your property? Sorry.
The property is 25 Rangamari Road.
Sorry, 25.
Rangamari Road.
25.
Rangimarie.
1 second.
Thanks very much.
Yeah. So in essence, the proposed district plan was logical and well.
You had it there.
It's on his machine.
Can everyone see that?
Yes, we can. Thanks.
You can see the highlighted area, which is our property, 25 Rangimarie Road, Ngaruawahia.
Yes.
I wonder, Fletcher, could we go back to just property? Or there's a logic. Yeah, that's the one I wanted. Yeah, so if you go to operative district plan, it's just a map that's helpful to get the context. You can actually see the front part of our property was zoned residential. Now that happened in the plan change 17, and we've now got that underway. The developer is developing it right now, if you like. The back part, there's a main drain, and the back part is currently zoned rural and proposed to be zoned residential. This part I'm pointing to, you wouldn't see, but where the road turns left, yeah, just in there is that shaded land is land owned by Mr. Upton, and it is zoned residential. So in plan change 17, that bit of land was changed to residential, plus the front part of our property. Now, Mr. Upton is contended that the divide of the two zones and the stream, or it's really a drainage district drain that runs through there, is really a wetland. And we certainly on our side of the divide, that is just not the case. We graze cattle and have an electric fence where they can't get into the drain. The drain's about 2 metres deep. It's maintained by the regional council. Yeah, in terms of setting up a wetland, if you're really keen, you'd have to work out some way of damming the water to get across the field. So as I say, certainly on our side of the divide, it isn't a wetland, and it wouldn't be any logic to creating it as a wetland, but certainly a logic where it's flat and that and developed for residential development, where plantings would happen, for example, and to make the outlook that much better. So there are a few items that I just would like to comment on, and I'll bring the second person in is a neighbour, Alan Vickers, and his original submission was 396. He was saying that the back part of our property is too hilly, so yes. Therefore all the land should not be rezoned to rural, to residential. Sorry. So in response to that, we said there's a steeper hill at the back of the east side.
Could we show, Mr. Chair? Could we show that Google map that underlays that? It gives us a better idea. Yeah.
Oh, right, the aerial view.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
So there's sorry. Yeah. So that sort of shows where the drain is, which is the divide, carries on through into the neighbour's area, which at the top right is residential land. So we're saying that it's just so logical for our back block to be rezoned to residential. The front part is now, like, the trees are gone, the development's happening, the houses will be going up, and next to our home that we retained there on the top would be the top left of the title of 25 Rangimario Road. There's a 20-metre corridor that goes down across the main drain, which so it's a farm crossing, all-weather crossing. But the point I'm highlighting here is we've made provision for residential development at the back, in terms of access. That was part of the consent. Another matter raised, was just coming back to that left steeper side. You've got Havelock Hill right up in the top right hand side, above where you move to Jackson Street. And I think Mr. Upton's saying we shouldn't have any interference with for the views. Certainly Havelock Hill, I don't think anything that we would build would impact Havelock Hill, bearing in mind that the trouble is I'm pointing, but I'm wasting time. The back on the right, Fletcher, if you're able to go back to our section, go back to that. So is that the right hand side? If we call it that whole area is easy contour for building, and then it becomes a bit more difficult as you go toward the higher ground, which we wouldn't expect the same sort of density of residential homes to be on that. I think that that covers the main. The main thing, the main point making that is not a wetland. Mr. Upton, I believe further round, there could be merit further round towards the Waipawa River. There could be merit in doing something to create a wetland. But so just to summarise, that's good. If you want to highlight our property feature. Yeah, just to summarise, the structure plan had provided for it, and the proposed district plan was completely consistent with the 2017 structure plan, Ngaruawahia structure plan. I think there's possibly some confusion over land going into the Uptons where it does goes more swampy, if you like, during a really wet winter. And Fletch, you may like to give it a try. I think just below the Upton triangle of residential land, I think the proposed version sort of takes a little bit more than for residential. Yeah, that's right. And whether you would have difficulty building on some of that lower land, but certainly in the case of our property, we're not intending to build on the lower land, obviously, but yeah, it's certainly not a wetland.
All right, thank you, Mr. Allen. That's pretty clear, I think.
Did you have the second submission we were responding to, Mr. Beckhurst's one?
Yes.
Or was it Mr. Upton?
No, we have. No, we have read them both.
Yeah, okay. You're considering them both.
Yeah, we are.
So our submission request is that our property should remain the same as the proposed district plan.
Yeah, and you've made that point clearly, and even though it's only a recommendation, that's the recommendation that the staff have made to us as well.
Yes. Yep. No, well, all things being equal, that's sort of where we're coming from.
Okay. Well, I think we understand the point.
Absolutely.
Let's see if there's any questions for you. I think, Mr. Allen, that's probably the best way forward. Sure. If you're happy with that.
Yeah, happy with that. Thank you.
But Mr. Fulton.
Yeah, no, I think you made it very clear. Thank you very much. No, with
Mr. Mark.
Happy with that.
Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Allen. I have no questions.
Ms. Sedgwick.
I have a couple of questions, if I may. One relates to the drain. Am I correct in understanding that the drain is totally covered in it and it's in a culvert?
No, it's an open drain.
It's an open drain, okay.
Yeah, it's an open drain with a culvert for a crossing about way in the property.
And it's maintained by the regional crossing under the drainage scheme. That's correct?
Well, I missed the first part of what you said.
I was asking for confirmation that it's being maintained by the regional council under the drainage scheme.
Yes, it is.
Okay, and so you talked about your cattle being kept off some of the land. Is that because of the drainage of the land or a particular planting on the land?
Yeah, in this case, where I was referring to the fencing, it was actually of a 2 metre wide, 2 metre deep drain has been fenced off because it's a hazard for cattle.
Right. And in the winter, what I'm just trying to work out, because in my experience, often drains are a little bit floody. In the winter, does that become a wetter area?
It'd be fair to say the drain does become wetter in that it goes right up to its banks.
Right.
The flow is quite fast from the catchment. But
Right.
in terms of the flatland to the side, it would be a bit wetter. But also we find like our we have Horotiu sandy loam down the bottom, up the back is more Hamilton clay, so you soon can make mud. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you very much. I have no more questions.
Thank you, Ms. Gibb.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Allen, it was very clear what you are asking for. I just want clarity around the rectangle shape, which you said was 20 metres. Is that a council paper road, or is it part of your land?
Yeah, it's 20 metres so that it complies with a full road, and it's on our land, which we currently own, because the back is still, it's actually part of the back title, but it is right of way for some of the residential homes that have been or will be built soon. But the long-term plan of it all is that it would become a vested road in council once, if there was the residential development happened, that road would become a road vested in the council, and it would carry various easements, etc., for the connections that it involves with the work being carried out right now.
Okay,
which
so
is all at the front.
Yeah, the work that's being carried out right now is under PC 17. That's already been zoned residential, and
that's right.
Yeah,
that's correct. Yeah.
Thanks for the clarity.
Residential land where we work. Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Anything, Mr. Cooney?
Well, you've developed part of your property. Are there sections on the market at the moment?
We've formed a company, and my wife and I, we're working with a developer, and the development's actually happening, and part of that is pre-sold homes.
Because I was going to, as a general question.
I should say pre-sold land that's developed, and then the house company would deal with the homeowners.
And what's the demand like for sections?
Well, very strong, because we thought we would develop this in a joint venture environment, and we were given an offer to not buy 1 or 2 houses. There's 14 houses, 16 when you count the 2 houses that'll be owned by us. So 14 houses for sale, and they wanted them all. Not 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever, they wanted them all, and we were able to negotiate an appropriate forward sale.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. I don't have any questions. That's very clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And is the process for me to just turn off now, or?
You're welcome to stay, welcome to go, just whatever suits you. But if you would turn your video and sound off, please.
Yep, thank you.
Which brings us to Mr. Roberts.
Start video.
Here we go. That's got it.
Cool. Well, thank you for allowing me to speak today. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Oh, that's good.
In a nutshell, my submission is just about the fact that given the density of houses that's going to be in Ngaruawahia South with the proposed developments, I'd like to keep the ridge lines free of housing. I'd like a visible amenity area there. And my logic behind that is basically that nature in itself is proving to be quite good in terms of health and well-being. So if you're looking at the visual amenity areas or areas of nature, they have positive health benefits. And this has actually all come out of COVID. You would have read that in your notes. And that comes from the lockdowns. And what they've found is it's complex. There's a complex link between nature, that is landscape, flora and fauna, and mental health and well-being. And I draw your attention to a New Scientist article. I put the website down there. I hope you can access it. I do have copies, which I could.
No, we can access that. Thank you.
You did access it?
We can do. I haven't accessed it at the that panel may have, but it's there. We can see it there.
So essentially, articles, greening of spaces the right way can boost well-being. And what that means is it helps redress social inequality, and it's a boon to the biodiversity in itself. In addition, it further access is found to improve sleep, reduce stress, increase happiness, reduce negative emotions. And I think we all inherently know that when we look at a scene or we're on a vista or something like that. So the thesis of my argument is if you're going to have that high density housing development down there, then strategically speaking, you are better to have your elevated ridge lines clear because that'll have the most impact for the people living around that. And the reason I actually draw on that particular thing is because of my history with Ngaruawahia. As I stated there, I've owned the pharmacies for the last 36 years. I've competed actively in the community. I've lived in Couch Street with Havelock Hill on the back there and the benefits of that. And my community is fragile with few resources. They're strong. As a community, it's a very strong community, but it's a fragile community. And so therefore, if you are going to increase the density of housing and what have you, and the type of housing that I have seen, the talk of the size of the sections and that, then you really do need green spaces and ecological spaces handy so that people can take advantage of that. You know, the majority, a lot of our community, it's a pushchair and a toddler. So to actually say to somebody, you can go in a car or you can go take a ride and go to a park or something like that, doesn't happen because the resources aren't there. And I think you have to be cognizant of that when you're actually making decisions around Ngaruawahia itself. So I think that's important. I think if you put green spaces, you have visual amenity areas handy to those areas, you're going to take a lot of stress off it. And I've spent 36 years mopping up that sort of thing, to be honest. You know, we've created community resource centers. We've developed social infrastructure as part of that over the last 36 years. We closed the Horotiu landfill because it was polluting the river. So I have a lot of experience with actually having to mop up that. And I'd kind of like to be a bit preemptive about that, given the new development, and actually have those things planned and in place so that those pressure points and stresses can be taken off. So I'm actually asking the council to be preemptive about this, designate those things now so that the rest of us and health and what have you in the future doesn't have to clean up. And in a nutshell, that is my submission.
Thanks, Mr. Roberts. I think that's pretty clear. Let's see if there's any questions for you. Ms. Cedric?
No, absolutely clear. Thank you very much.
Ms. Gibb?
Yes, very clear. I guess you're advocating a balance there, Mr. Roberts.
Thank you, Janet.
Mr. Marg?
No, thank you.
Mr. Fulton?
Just one thing, Mr. Roberts, could you identify any of the ridgeline areas which you are referring to? I support your comments about your health and wellbeing, but
I think it's Havelock Hill, and I think I'm actually looking at it's interesting that unlike Marguerite and John, which tend to look south,
yes,
I'm actually predominantly looking north. So it's sort of the line that if you look at that area there, which is round Jackson's Road and as that elevated land there. So if you're thinking of housing developments in that sort of Sawbury Road up to that stretch there, then that's the ridge line I'm thinking of. I'm not that au fait with Margarita and John's view from the other side. It's been a while, to be honest. So since I've been to their place, I can see that they were actually sort of alluding to various areas, or at least low density housing in that area anyway from their side.
Okay, I take the point. So that's clearly the area you're referring to, because I think all the other subdivision is really not affected, the proposed subdivisions on the eastern side of the river.
This is definitely on the southern side.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that, because friends of mine, all my friends tended to be around that area. So the views that I saw there, say from Fires Gardens or the Sills, or were always from that facing north and as such. So I'm very familiar with that. I'm familiar with the other side, the eastern side, but my argument is basically regarding that particular ridgeline, because I'm most au fait with that.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Roberts. Thank you.
Mr. Mark?
No, nothing for me, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cooney?
No, thanks.
No, and I don't have any questions either. Thank you, Mr. Roberts.
Thank you.
Our next submitter is Mr. Butt and Ms. Kruger. I think on behalf of, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right, Kiana Lace.
Yeah, yep. Bye.
Kia ora. Good afternoon. I'm Brian.
Cheryl.
Hello.
Thanks for the opportunity of actually presenting to you today.
It's quite all right.
Our submission is for Kiana Lace for our family trust in relation to the property at 399 Bedford Road here in Paradise, Te Kowhai. We 6 years ago escaped Auckland and moved back to the Waikato, where we'd been previously in our previous lives. And in doing so, really enjoyed the village concept associated with Te Kowhai here, and bought our small farm and retired here. With that in mind, we understand that the concept of village living with a small village concept, and surrounded by the residential, then the country living, moving into the rural. And certainly we don't want to go back into the city either from that perspective. It's we also understand that that we're aging, and there's enough work on this little farm at the moment to keep us occupied. But as we get older and dribblier, we want to be in a position to move some of that care to somebody else's, the care of the property to somebody else's ownership. We took the opportunity of making a submission, both in terms of the SNA that was on the back end of our property as we back onto the Te Ota Manui stream, and that's been the council's agreed with our proposal and around that. And then the second portion of that was the opportunity to move from rural to country living zoning in that space, so we can actually sell off some of the property as we're no longer able to care for. The proposals we put up along with the evidence, the hearing frame, the Section 25 framework, the Section 42A report framework was very instructive for us, and pointed us at the appropriate structure plans and population, etc. And we're able to see that the majority of our proposal aligned with all those particular reports, and so we put that evidence in front of you, and I got no doubt that that's available to you right now. What else? It's our home. We want to remain in this particular part of the world, and we just like the opportunity to be flexible further on down the track with that in mind. You got anything else you want to sweet?
No, we see a natural boundary being the entrance to the walkway, which we've donated part of our property to allow the entrance from Bedford Road down to the stream and through the walkway back to Te Kowhai for the kids and mums with prams and what have you. And that for us forms a very natural boundary to the rural, which is the farmlet next door, and us. That's really it, really.
We also note that the Section 42 report from Jonathan Cleese recommends acceptance of our particular proposal, and we're very pleased with the outcome associated with that at this point in time.
And your property is one of those three that he said was on that little cutout part of the country living area right at the very top, where Bedford Road's got that dog leg in it. Is that's correct? Yeah.
Okay. The furthest property, the biggest one.
Yes, gotcha. Thank you.
All right, that's
all right. That's clear enough. Let's see if there's any questions. Let's start with you this time, Mr. Marg, please.
Oh, they're very, very, very clear and very simple. And thank you very much for your presentation.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Fulton.
No questions. Thank you.
Ms. Gibb.
No questions, thank you.
Ms. Sedgwick.
Sorry, I can't find the size of the block of land that you're talking about. I know the location. What's the size of the land in total?
It's around about 2.65 hectares.
Close to 7 acres.
Yeah, close to 7 acres.
Right, in total, and that's what you want to change to country living?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Gibb.
No, thank you.
Mr. Kearney.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
No, and I have no questions either. Thank you both. It's very clear, and yeah, it's no questions from me. But thank you for your time today.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks,
bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Next, we have Mr. Johnson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Thanks for your time. If you could just enlighten me, are you happy for my written notes to be accepted, or do I need to read you those?
No, you don't need to read those. We have read it and read that and seen the map that you have attached to it. So you don't need to read it out. Feel free to just comment on things as you see fit.
Mr. Chair, can we put the map up of the?
I've got it here. It's the property immediately was referred to earlier. It's the little cutout part on the northern on the Kowhai airfield at the bottom there. But
that's it.
I'll put it on the screen so we can.
Thank you.
So we can see it.
So I'd like to submit in respect of the property at 158 being the lower centre portion of
that's there, right?
Thank you. And also on behalf of my brother-in-law Robert to clear, being the 176 property.
Which is in there.
I'm sorry?
Didn't buy.
Pardon?
Sorted. I just muted someone.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we understand where the property is, Mr. Johnson, so fire away.
So effectively, I mean, the submissions I've presented are hypothetical in the event that a subdivision is granted for the airfield. But I think that we will be impacted reasonably severely if that proposition goes ahead. We aren't able to utilise the land as we would like or need in the future, as I've explained. That's pretty much the submission, really. I mean, it's what I've written.
No, and that's fine. You've concluded by saying that you're concerned that if the air park proposal is granted, you'll be adversely impacted. Is your submission to us that the air park proposal should be declined, or that your land should be zoned similarly to that land because of the impacts on you?
Like I explained in my submission, we're constrained as to what we can say around the subdivision but we are not opposed to the subdivision per se.
Right. Okay.
It's just, yeah, our submission relates to the ability for us in the future, if we need to be able to, the issues are around effectively the use of our land and how we perceive we might be constrained to be able to utilise the land in the future if the development goes ahead.
All right. Let's see if there's any questions just to follow up on that. Mr. Fulton?
Mr. Warren, Johnson, did you make a submission to the air park?
Again, we were constrained, we weren't able to.
Okay, thank you. No other questions, thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Fulton. Mr. Marg?
No, thank you.
Ms. Gibb?
Yes, just to clarify, so it's about reverse sensitivity issues because you're farming your land and you're concerned about that. Is that correct?
Certainly, if we have neighbours around us, like currently we're dry stock farming and the issues with stock, heifers that bellow and bulls that may also bellow. And conceivably in the future, if that wasn't conceivable, do we go to horticulture, some sort of horticultural farming, and the flow-on issues with that, with close neighbours with spraying and the like.
Yes, and you're on Highway 39, that's correct.
Yes, that's right. But we will be completely bounded by that subdivision if it proceeds.
Okay, I understand your concerns. It's just as the chair says, I'm just trying to work out what relief you're asking for. Anyway, that's good. I think I've got a better understanding of it now. Thank you.
Ms. Sedgwick?
I have no questions. I understand what you're saying. Thank you.
Mr. Cooney?
Yeah, just on that point, what are you actually seeking? What rezoning are you seeking for this land?
We would just be falling in line with the subdivisions around us. So I perceive that as country living. So effectively the same as or similar to the airfield proposition.
Okay.
It's not, I mean, it's certainly not something that we consider as a requirement. It's just down the track, if unforeseeable issues arise, then what do we do?
Perhaps Mr. Cleese can clarify at the moment while you're here. What overall zone was the air park? It was a multi-use zone, wasn't it, for the air park?
Special purpose zone.
Yeah.
With 4 precincts.
Yeah. So, Mr. Cleese, can you just clarify what you've interpreted to be the relief sought?
Yes, so it was very much that the Longa Road blocks, Mr. Johnson's blocks, be rezoned to village zone. Okay. We literally go down to sort of 3,000 square metres unserviced.
And that's not tied exclusively to the air park, is it?
No. So there's no link to the air park. It's more, I guess, my recommendation was if the panel agree with the air park concept, then Mr. Johnson's 2 blocks are left with this funny little kind of rural enclave, if you like. So it would form a more logical urban edge if he was rezoned to village. Conversely, if the panel aren't convinced about the air park concept and it just remains a sort of an airfield with no residential, then potentially Mr. Johnson's blocks should stay rural. So my recommendation is very much based on the base
the air park.
Runs with the air park concept.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. I can understand that. Can you, Mr. Johnson, can you understand that now?
Yes, I can, and that is certainly the issue that we have. I mean,
yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Right, thank you very much, Mr. Johnson. I don't have any questions. That's all clear enough. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And as per the other submitters, you're welcome to stay and listen, or you're welcome to go and do something else, whatever suits you best.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
That brings us to Hamilton City Council. Ms. Galt, please.
Apologies, sorry, my computer's playing up. Hello, you have had me before, so I won't go into any other details. It's all in my evidence from previous. Excuse me one moment. Yes, am I able to use the screen?
I've got your, can you see the screen?
Yeah, I can see it.
Do you want to take charge of that, do you? Do you want to put your presentation on the screen or something else?
No, unfortunately, I'm having issues with my laptop not behaving, so if we can just use your screen, that's fine.
You talk and I'll move the presentation down to where I think you're up to.
All right, thank you. If we can go to the next slide, very briefly, I'm just going to cover Te Kowhai and Horotiu today. I'm not going to go to Ngaruawahia or Taupiri. Next one. I'm a bit of a visual person myself, so I like to see the context. So this is just Te Kowhai and surround, so it shows the relative position of Te Kowhai itself to Hamilton, and also with council holdings, submission and request right on our on the city boundary at the moment. And next one. So as Mr. Cleese outlined, there's sort of 3 areas that are subject to change, I guess, through the recommendations. The first one is the country living zone, which is that top end Bedford Road. You've heard about that several times. Hamilton City still maintains an overall objection to sort of further country living zone in the Waikato district, but we've got no specific objection to the Bedford Road based on Mr. Cleese's reports. We still maintain our opposition to the Lima Road, and we're just not supportive of any further village zone in the Waikato district. The reasons are set out in our evidence previously. I do want to note it's a fair statement by Mr. Cleese that there's a tension between the logical boundary of Te Kowhai versus the wider strategic picture, which ourselves and the regional council have an issue with, and I agree with Ms. Foley and the arguments for the regional council has put forward for that. So we still seek that area, those 2 land areas are zoned rural. The last one is the Metcalf block to the east. And I've read Mr. Cleese's recommendations and his further rebuttal, and it's premature to rezone this as a live residential zone. There's still things that need to be sorted out. So we support the 42A author. The council holdings land, so yeah, HCC supports the recommendations to retain the rural zoning of the submitter's land. As it's been previously stated, it's not identified in any of the growth strategies or even the metro spatial plan at this stage. So there are other avenues that are more appropriate to identify those out of zone or out of sequence growth areas before any rezoning happens in the Waikato district plan or Hamilton's plan, and if it is the case in the future. Just quick 2 notes on Horotiu. We support the 42A author's recommendation to retain the rural zoning of the Perry Group limited land. So that's that triangle that abuts the expressway. That's all right.
But we know where you mean.
Yeah, sorry, I don't have a map of that one. And then we also support the retaining the rural zone of the Horotiu Properties limited land at 27 Sullivan Road. So I don't think anyone's addressed that today. So that is north of the Waikato River from Horotiu. Again, I haven't got a map to hand to show you that one, but yeah, we don't want a country living zone there. The last few slides is just to list our submission points and further submission points that we've addressed either in evidence or my presentation today. Just noting I have realised I've missed Metcalf's submission that we furthered on off that second list. And that's all from me today. I'll take any questions.
Very good, thank you. Let's see if there are any questions. Let's start with you, Ms. Gibb, please.
No questions, thank you. Very clear.
Cool.
Ms. Sedgwick?
No, I have none either. It is clear. And thank you for your report.
Mr. Mark?
No, thank you.
Mr. Fulton?
Oh, I don't have any questions. Thank you very much.
Mr. Cooney?
Just can you just update me? And I've read your previous evidence, but your reasons for generally opposing country living and village zone in the district. Can you just explain just briefly what that's based on? Where are we?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to look where I've put my notes.
Just at a high level.
Just at a high level.
Yeah.
It's the cross-boundary issues that we have, particularly when it's on our boundary. I believe Mr. Davey, Dr. Davey, in his original framework report set out what those issues were fairly clearly. It's an impact on Hamilton City.
It would be the interface, wouldn't it, between the Hamilton and the cross-boundary issues along your border, as it were. Is that the main concern?
Yeah, that's our main concern, is those cross-boundaries, so like the transport, the waters. Obviously, the issue with waters and Te Kowhai now, we're a bit more comfortable with that, with the indication that could likely come from Horotiu or the likes.
So is it fair to say the further away the location is from your border or your boundary, the less opposition?
Yeah, in general, the further it is from our boundary, we had less opposition. We haven't addressed the likes, I know it's in another Zoom hearing, but the likes of Matangi, where we'll leave that to Waikato District to figure out.
Yeah, okay. Thanks very much, and thanks for the way you present your summary. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I have another question, please?
Sure.
Just following on from Commissioner Cooney, Ms. Galt. So the further away from Hamilton City boundary, the less opposition you have, and yet you have opposed the rezoning in Taupiri. So yeah, that is a bit of a concern when you said further away, the least opposition, because they're quite, 20, 30 kilometres away.
Yeah, sorry, I probably misspoke there. We've got the opposition when it's on our boundary. There's a clear interaction between Hamilton City. Our opposition in terms of Taupiri came from when our original submission, we had an area of interest which encapsulated right out to Taupiri. And I guess we're not as concerned about that as we were originally. In terms of country living zoning, it's an inefficient use of land, particularly if you want your residential densities. So that's where we're coming from now.
Yes, so you were particularly talking about country living zone as opposed to urban residential.
Yes. So where it's previously been included in those urban limits, we're not particularly concerned about that. Obviously that's fluid, and they're reviewing future proof at the moment, so they may change, but yeah.
Thanks very much for clarifying that.
Thank you, Ms. Gibb. And I have no questions either. Thank you, Ms. Galt. That's all very
Mr.
clear.
Chair, just one thing on from that. Sorry to bring this in, but the area of interest that was put to us when we first started this journey, Hamilton came along and gave us an area of interest, and we had a debate about it. And I think Hamilton was saying, well, you be very careful telling us what we should be doing in that area of interest. And I think it was quite a large area of interest, I must say. Has your position modified on that?
So just prior to the rural hearing, we put a legal submission in relation to that area of interest, and basically where things were heading with the rurals, because that was the other concern, was it keeping that rural zone versus a rural residential zones popping up everywhere. We were happy with how the rural zone rules and the extent of that rural zoning, and where that was headed at that stage. So yeah, that area of interest, we're quite happy with how it's been managed.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
And I have no questions as foreshadowed. Thank you very much, Ms. Galt.
Well, thank you for your time.
Brings us to Mr. Fetu, please.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Lovely to see you all. I was wondering if I can just go, all right, just sharing, trying to keep it nice and focused for us. So just confirming, I am the last person of the day.
That's correct.
Yoo-hoo, well done. Where am I looking at? So, Mr. Chair, today I am representing my submission. So I'm not here as James Fetu planner, I'm just as James Fetu, a property owner in the Waikato district in Ngaruawahia. Cool. Are we able to see the presentation? Mr.
Yeah, we can see that, thanks.
Awesome. So again, just to reiterate, I'm here just to represent my submission. And so just in that regard, I'm just here to provide I guess, a reason for the submission, the ambition or the aspirations behind the rezone being sought through the proposed district plan process, and I guess relief sought through the process. So I guess just setting the context here. So the submission is, it relates to 2, 6 and 8 Durham Street in Ngaruawahia. And currently under the operative district plan, the properties are zoned light industrial. And coming through in the proposed district plan, they will be zoned industrial. And so through the submission process, we were seeking that these 3 properties be zoned business zone. So this is just an aerial shot of the properties, just in case. Here we go.
Blow that up a bit.
Sorry, what was that?
Can we blow that up a bit? Just bring it out a bit.
Ooh.
Oh, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if you can't.
Cool. So when we purchased the properties, my wife and I, at the moment, the numbers are 2, 4, 6, and 8. The buildings were pretty much derelict. So they weren't in good standard, and they had not been used except for number 4, which people were living in. So when we purchased the properties, these were the buildings on site. And yeah, so some of these properties weren't used for those purposes, nor were they, in this regard, this house in front of us, weren't suitable for residential living either. And so in this particular building here, the actual building collapsed, the roof and ceiling collapsed on the other end. So So for many years, well, when I shouldn't say many years, probably for about 8 years plus, these buildings were not well used for light industrial purposes. And so in going through the office's 42A report, I noted that the recommendation to you as the committee is to reject my submission. And I looked at the reasons and yep, I note that there was limited information available for the council planner or the council's officer to assess the merits. I acknowledge that, as well as what was within the report. And I guess this is where I'm testing was, there was mention of recommending that these properties form part of council's review of the business zone, but still there was an element of rejection, rejecting my submission. So I guess I'm here to test that around the relief I'm seeking. And the reasons being is my wife and I, the vision we've been having for these properties is how do we bring our communities together and provide opportunities for that social entrepreneur business sort of hub that sits within our community, but currently doesn't have an outlet to express that, especially in our town centre. And so, so what we've done is we've removed those buildings and we've added some colour, and we've provided shared office spaces for sole consultants, traders within our community to work within these buildings, as well as container areas for local business owners to give it a go. And because we're using containers in a small area or footprint, their overheads or their risk in trying to give it a go has sort of minimized. So what we've done to date, and over summer we tested what we've called the marketplace. So a place where food and drink is provided in a safe and comfortable and family orientated manner. And so what we have in our little marketplace area, which has replaced the old derelict buildings, is we have a charcoal chicken, Lebanese chicken outlet here that does kebabs and chicken. And we have what we call the world famous Fat Patty burgers. And so these are operated by local people. They both own the two stores here, and they have a huge following here locally. And they provide an assortment of meals that caters to quite a few different people. We have a small little garden bar. We went through the liquor licensing process, and we're on a bit of a trial pilot kind of test of that license, and provides that sort of atmosphere from 4 o'clock to 9 p.m. at night, Wednesday to Saturday. Again, trying to maintain a very community, family focused environment to enjoy drink with your meals. And here we have, again, another local person who started up a coffee cafe, not cafe, but a coffee place. And in the evenings, they serve some meals to complement those who wish to have a drink or stay in our properties. So this is just what's on offer. This is their guide. This is their marketing that they put out there on social media and out to in the wider Waikato district around. This is our offering. This is local people. This is local people offering back to our community and supported by our community. In terms of the rest of the properties, so this house, the purple one, we've retrofitted to be the offices of my consultancy, Whetū Consultancy, and we work in there with 2 other consultancies who are from Ngaruawahia, and one's from Taupiri, to be honest. Then we have our little green building, and there's a little boutique store run by a local person who who stores and sells local produce items, so soap, dresses, paintings, photographies, taonga, pounamu. And then in the red building or red pink building, we have, again, local sole traders who are working together in the real estate, mortgagee, financial side of things, a lawyer and 2 lawyers actually. One does conveyancing and family, and the other one does more in the Māori land space. And hopefully one day we'll have a nice big building here again with an offering for the community, led by the community. And just after lockdown, I shouldn't say just after lockdown, but after lockdown last year, we purchased this property here, number 10 Durham Precinct, Durham Street. And I wish to include this as part of the submission process if I can. So in terms of the relief sought, Mr. Chair and the committee, I guess it was the continuance to seek the rezoning of these 3 properties in Ngaruawahia from a light industrial to business zone. And if we can add number 10 Durham Street to the rezoning process. From our perspective, we can and have demonstrated merit. So I don't think there's a rationale reason to do technical reporting to say whether this place or these properties are suitable or have merit to be rezoned. We're doing it. We've gone through the resource consent process, obviously, but I think since this is a potential to address this through the proposed district plan, this will give some certainty to everybody around the activities we can do on site. And from our point of view, we feel like we are achieving community outcomes for Ngaruawahia and Waikato District. We're bringing people together, we're talking, and I guess that social construct within Ngaruawahia specifically has been awesome, especially coming through this process. So yes, Mr. Chair, that is my submission.
Thanks very much, Mr. Feder. I just want to share my screen so that the rest of the panel can, if they're not familiar, I'm sure the councillors will know where we are, but just to contextualise this for the others. This is Google Earth. As I understand, the properties you're talking about are in here. There's the railway line. There's the old state highway. That's the, whoops, what have I done there?
Come back.
What happened there? And that it's just for context, and something or other's gone wrong with my screen, so I won't do that any further. But that's where the old pub on the corner is. It's across the highway, across the railway line, and immediately on the other side there, in that little triangle that I was trying to show before, but have now lost. That's correct? Here we go. I might have got it. Oh, what's going on here? Yeah, so you're in here. This isn't as clear as the aerial photograph, but you're in this block here.
It's nothing coming up.
Pardon?
There's nothing coming through.
Okay, I'll try this. This isn't as good as what we had before. But there's there's the Great South Road,
yep.
The railway line, the pub's on, I think this corner here, I think.
Yep.
And then it's across the road, and that's that big roundabout that you go through, that if you're ever going up the back way to, you come across here and cross the river, across the Waipaha River, and you can go north or south from there.
Mr. Chair, if it's of any help, I can share an aerial photo.
That'll be good, please. I'll get rid of that. I don't know what happened to Google Earth.
Can everyone see that?
Yep. Yeah, just go, I think, go back out a little bit just for context. I think that would be helpful.
But that's obviously a very old Google photo, which...
Correct, it's off our intro maps. I can go to Google, I don't have Google Earth, but I can try and get it from there.
Oh, that's
so anyway, that's Durham Street. The properties that you're talking about, Mr. Fetu, are along here. There's the pub on the corner. Oh, now I've lost myself. Where are we? The pub's on the corner over here. And your properties are these ones here. Can you just zoom that back out a little bit, please? Maybe that's a little bit much, but that's okay. It's these. Not having much luck. Right, don't touch. It's the properties on this side of the road, isn't it? Or is it on this side? Now I've confused myself.
Yep, down that side.
Yeah. Okay, I think is everyone clear where they are?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
All right, let's see if there's any questions. Thanks, Mr. Whetu. Ms. Gibb?
No questions, just congratulations on what you've done already, Mr. Whetu. And just for clarity, you are just wanting to zone the area where number 10 is into business zone, is that correct?
I think what he says, sorry, he seems to have disconnected him.
Here he is, he's still there.
Yeah, I'm back on now, correct. Sorry, I had to, sorry, what was the question? Sorry,
Yeah, I'm just clarifying. So you've got resource consent already for the ones that you've already done, and you've now bought number 10 and you're just wanting business zone, is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
But you're wanting business zone on 24, I thought it was 248, 268, but it might be 4 as well. And you want that extended to 10. So it's not, you don't want to rely just on the resource consent. You want the properties in their totality zoned
Correct.
business.
Yes, yes. So, or if we can, yes. So 2, 6, 8, and 10 rezone to business zone, please. That's the relief sought.
Very good. Thank you. Ms. Sedgwick?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Marg?
Tēnā James. Hey, just look, one question. Number 4 you own as well, though, don't you?
Correct. Yes. It's just the number on the building. It's not the physical address. So there's 2 and 4 registered to 2 Durham Precinct, Durham Street.
Okay. And look, congratulations on what you and your wife have done. Fantastic. And it's quite clear what you're seeking from us. So, ka pai.
Kia ora. Thank you.
Mr. Fulton?
Yes, Mr. Whetu, why didn't you apply for the whole of that triangle block? Because it is a very clearly isolated block to be changed to business zone.
I guess it was at the time the vacant section that's next door to it is owned. The 2 properties that went not part of I suppose what I own. They haven't been party to the process, I guess. I did mention it to one of the owners who owns the vacant section, but they chose not to participate. So I guess it was more on the fact that I just seeking rezoning of my properties. It would be smart, to collectively do all the properties, but I didn't represent it. I guess I didn't want to do it on their behalf.
Okay, so under the proposed plan, you're saying that your businesses couldn't operate there unless you get a resource consent for each one. Is that what the issue is, as opposed to that'd be a permitted activity under your submission?
Correct, yes. So for some of those activities, yes, they'll be permitted. And obviously there's still resource consent triggers if there's in terms of scale or outside of that amenity aspects of a business zone. But because it's industrial zone, a lot of those office activities that don't complement or are associated with an industrial activity triggered resource consent. So I guess it was trying to enable all forms of business or office type activities on that street if it wasn't part of an industrial activity.
Thank you, Mr. Whetu.
Mr. Kearney?
Yeah, I just, Mr. Fulton, Commissioner Fulton raised the point that I was going to raise with you. It's a pity the whole block has not been reconsidered. So how many other owners are there in that block?
So there is 3 other owners.
3 others, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. No, I can understand what you're doing there, and well done on bringing a dead site into life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you.
Just one from me, Mr. Whetu. The 3 others, are they 4, 6, and 8 Princess Street? Princess Street.
They are.
And what are they used for currently?
So one of them, which is the abuts the train tracks, is a storage sheds.
Yes.
And then there's a small unused. It used to be a mechanic or tire shop in that place. And that's unused. And then the vacant section is Ngaruawahia Trust. And so I've been trying to work with them to see what we could do together. Not necessarily, in terms of opening up the opportunity of that piece of land, but yeah, this is a planning process.
All right. No, that's clear enough. Thank you. All right, thanks, Mr. Petty. That's very clear. And yeah, well done on your initiative thus far.
Yeah.
Thank
Awesome.
you. Cool. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Which brings us to the end of today. I don't think there's anything we need to do before we adjourn. If there is, now's a good time to put your hand up and we'll address it. Otherwise, we'll adjourn till the morning. It would appear that there's nothing to raise, so we will adjourn. We'll see everyone that's wishing to attend tomorrow at 9 o'clock in the morning. Thank you. If the panel wouldn't mind